Hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. All right, we have a very packed agenda this evening, so we're going to go right into our discussion items. The first item is the
Peter?
2021-2022 assessment schedule. So Dr. Carabillo and Mr. D'Amico.
Peter, I didn't to interject. I'd like to make a motion to move one of the action items up to first business with respect to Dr. Jones's goals.
Is there a second for that? Actually, because it's a special meeting, we have to stick to our agenda. I think we probably could move it. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I understand. I think that's one of the key items, and it's way down in our agenda. I think we're all going to lose steam and focus. And I think that it would benefit both the board and the community if we had that discussion sooner rather than later in our meeting.
All right, well, before we get into discussing it, is there a second for that? To move Dr. Jones's goals?
I'm sorry, what was the motion again?
Well, really, you're not supposed to be playing with your agenda. We're not adding an item. We would just be moving one of the action items, the superintendent's goals, to the first item of the meeting. So is there a second for that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, there's a second discussion. I actually like it at the end because it gives us an incentive to get through the rest of our business and not get to the end of the meeting and not be paying attention. So I'm happy to have other discussion if you want to raise your hands. All right, we're going to go ahead. Ms. Kowalski, did you want to speak?
I guess I've already said what I really wanted to say on this. I think that the superintendent's goals are a critical issue, and obviously I don't want to force us to shortchange anything in the agenda in order to get to it, as that being the carrot at the end of the stick component to it. But I do think it deserves attention and fresh eyes, and not tired and weary eyes at the end of a long day and a long week. So I just would prefer it be moved forward to the beginning.
Ms. Stowe?
I hear you, Karen. The only reason I'm probably not going to vote for it is because I imagine for like the entryway, we probably have the architect on the line and things like that. And so I don't want to go too late into the meeting. Also, I am on like my third coffee of the day, so I am good. But
All right, Ms. Hirsch?
Much like Ms. Stowe, I think all of the subjects we have are this evening are exceptionally important, but we have a huge percentage of our administrative staff here to do a couple of presentations. And I know they have a long day ahead of them again tomorrow. So I don't want to take up more of their time when they are working so hard and diligently if we move them further down the list.
All right, anybody else? Hearing none, so the motion on the table is to move the superintendent's goals to the first item of the meeting. It's an action item. So we'll do, actually, all of us are in person, so we can actually do a raise hand. Look at that. Gaetan is on her way. So she's not on Zoom because we're in person. So all of those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, all of those opposed. All right, motion fails 5-2. So we will move on to our agenda as it is. The first item is the 2021-2022 assessment schedule. Dr. Carabillo and Mr. D'Amico.
Who unfortunately is not here with us tonight, as he had an accident yesterday and he will not be with us for a little bit. It gives us great pleasure to present to you for the very first time our entire K-12 curriculum experts. I would like to introduce all of them to you. Colleagues, please stand when I call your name so the public can put a face to who you are. Dr. Benjamin Marcus, our interim K-8 ELA and Social Studies Coordinator. Michael Reed, our K-8 Math Coordinator. Tara Fogel, our K-8 Science Coordinator. Adrian Hirsch-Klein, our K-12 ESL and World Languages Coordinator. Bonnie O'Regan, our K-8 ALP Facilitator. Laura Newell, who also is not here this evening because she's home with her new daughter, Zora, our K-12 Music and Arts Coordinator. Bridget Berry, our 9 through 12 ELA Program Administrator. Lucy Orecko, our 9 through 12 Social Studies and History Administrator. John DeLuca, our 9-12 Science Program Administrator. Andrew Byrne, our 9 through 12 Math Program Administrator. And Christina Shaw, our 9 through 12 World Languages Program Administrator. You will be hearing from all of them this evening. Tonight, we will be presenting our 2021-22 assessment calendar and the 2021 Summer Curriculum Institute summary. We believe that assessment drives instruction. Assessments need to be universally acceptable, accessible, comprehensive, efficient, reliable, and valid. This calendar explains the various types of assessments so you can be assured we have a balanced system. Assessments allow teachers to use data from the end of the day and/or the lesson to inform instructional decisions for the subsequent content to be taught. Unit assessments based on content allow teachers and administrators to review trends, look for gaps in understanding, or misconceptions that students may have. Once they are identified, plans can be put in place to address areas of need. Statewide assessments such as SBA, NGSS, SAT are reviewed and discussed between central office staff, building and curriculum administrators, and school teams to determine needed changes to address student outcomes and ways we utilize our interventionists, coaches, and addressing professional learning needs. The assessment document also addresses the concerns we have heard from parents, teachers, and students regarding the excess number of assessments students take. You will be pleased to learn that we have reduced the number of assessments. The elimination of STAR at the middle school level affords the addition of 6 additional teaching blocks in ELA and math. We are using the district benchmark assessments housed in Linkit 3 times a year in ELA and math to monitor progress, adjust instruction, and provide feedback. We are also eliminating STAR ELA and math for our grade 3 through 5 students. We are using STAR Early Literacy for our K-1 students and STAR Reading for our grade 2 students as required by the state for our universal screen. The state only requires a universal reading screen for K-3, and we've determined with our targeted assessments, there will be more time and focus on teacher planning and instruction and student outcomes. We will continue to use as a universal screener STAR for all students new to the district to assess their current performance properly. So now I would like to have Dr. Marcus. He will share the calendar and the new format with you.
Thank you, Dr. Carabillo. Can we move on to the assessment calendars page? Thank you. So here's an example of what we've done with the new format, broken down by marking periods. What we also did is consolidated the different assessments based on the different curricular areas, so parents will know which exams they're taking within each curricular area based on the marking period. Here's an example of our kindergarten assessment. Next slide, please. Here is an example of what we have for our second grade assessments. You can see they're broken down again by curricular area and by marking period. Next slide, please. An example of what 5th grade looks like. And next slide, please. And you can see our 8th grade. You can see as they do progress in the grades, there are additional assessments because there are additional units to assess. Moving forward, next slide. And then you have the standardized assessments at the high school with our standardized exams for college prep and our AP exams with the College Board. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Assessment schedule. All right, so before we get to that, we see if board members have any questions or comments on the assessment schedule. Just to make sure that's going to get posted on the website and update what was previously there, right?
I'm sorry.
That's going to be posted on the website so parents can see that. Fantastic. All right, Mr. Chair.
I guess, Ann, Ann, could you discuss I guess I'm trying to look at, this terminology is not familiar to me. I'm familiar with the terminology, summative assessments and formative assessments. Formative assessments, I expect, are used by instructors to determine and adjust their instruction to get specific to the needs of kids. So I see summative. Maybe you can explain which of these are formative. That's part one. And then you probably
I
want to put
think
this.
on the calendar, it says which ones are formative and
Well,
which
it
ones are
says the
summative.
terminology. It says
Yeah.
summative, pre-assessment, screener, progress monitor, universal screener, and benchmark. So I'm
Mhm.
just a little confused by that language.
So Peter, maybe to
So-
help you, page 7 of the
Right.
document
Yeah,
that's
so
posted as the
that's
definitions.
That's part one. And what I was really interested in doing is if you could explain. I got the part about summatives. I don't,
Mhm.
I guess I wanted to understand what your strategy now is, if you could explain it in simple terms, because it's, this is spelled by grade and it's broken out piece by piece. I'm really interested in understanding your overall strategy on the use of formative assessments, how often you're going to use them. Which
Formative assessments can be used during every single class so that when teachers need to adjust their instruction, they can.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So my question, thank you for answering that question. That
Mhm.
wasn't my question, but
Oh.
thank you.
Sorry.
My question is that we had established a cadence and a rhythm so that we had a nationally normed test, not one we were developing or not developed by not one of the leading. Our strategy had been to use one of the leading test development companies in the country, not a small shop or not doing it ourselves. That decision was made by the board, maybe even before you got here, probably. And because we had been using all of our own internal assessments and there was no consistency, we were developing our own, which probably was not particularly highly correlated to what we were trying to find out about performance against a standardized curriculum that's tested by SBAC. So we had pursued this strategy and I never cared what the test was. I cared what the quality of the test was and who was developing the test. That was the more important part. So I think we had, Bill McCursey had come in, or maybe it was one of the other superintendents after him, came in and then recommended using Renaissance as a company, which is
Mhm.
nationally used by everybody. There are a bunch of others. You could use McGraw-Hill, and there's a
NWEA.
bunch of other people who
Mhm.
make tests. So the strategy was so that we could assess kids at the beginning of the
Mhm.
year to find out where they are. We could assess them at the mid-year. We could assess them close to, and I never really understood why we did this, close to right before we were deliver SBAC. So that I guess somebody could, spend the last couple of weeks adjusting instruction specific for kids, I guess. I don't know. I could go back and figure out what I was told at the time. So I'm looking at this and I'm just having a little trouble following that strategy. So is this still your strategy and you're using different tests? And if you are, which ones are you using? And then I see a bunch of other ones in here, which I know are specialized, right? They're for certain kids in certain situations.
Mhm.
I'm interested in looking at this list for what does every kid get? And then which ones are the specialized? So I had a little bit of a hard time discerning that from reading this document because it's all kind of like bunched in grade and I can see what you're using. I'm more interested in the overall strategy that affects all the kids and if you've got a different strategy now, what is it? And which one is the primary formative assessment that every kid gets so that the teacher can keep up along the way on how a kid is performing. So that was really.
Dr. Carabello, can I
Try-
just jump in for a minute?
Thank you.
I think, one of the discussions we've had over last year and coming into this year is we have moved towards Link It as an assessment that is highly valued by our staff because it gives such great information about really actionable so that they know how to really help close those opportunity gaps for children. And in using Link It, we are able to get information that we could not get from STAR. And as we've had these conversations, again, with staff, with principals, we were not using STAR really at all in middle school. And what we were hearing, especially from even some members of the board last year, about how many assessments our kids were taking, especially at the end of the year. So the strategy really hasn't changed. It is a different assessment, and we have done all the correlation work, and it does correlate to SBAC. And I'm sure that at some point during the school year, when Jen Lau was here, and we're presenting data, we'll be able to show you that correlation.
Okay, so I just, maybe you can help me because I was trying to see where is Link It on this? Like I'm looking at grade, I happen to be on page 10, I'm looking at grade 2. Is it just called something else? So I'm looking at grade 2, marking period 1.
Peter,
September
if I could interject, can you hear me?
Yes, Mark, we can hear you.
Great.
Very
Oh,
loud.
That's weird. It's like a voice from God. Wow, it's like, wow, that's really impressive.
Sorry, I can't be there in person tonight, but let me try and answer your question briefly.
Yeah.
You won't see the word Link It attached in the assessment. What you will see is we call it the Greenwich benchmark assessment for the fall, the winter, and the spring. Do you see that indication?
Oh, the last line. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So that's the new formative assessment using
No.
the terminology we originally used? No?
Well,
I
I'd
would-
be,
I wouldn't call it,
It's a benchmark.
I wouldn't call it a formative assessment. It's a benchmark. We want to see in the beginning of the year, where are children, let's say fourth graders.
Correct.
Where are fourth graders at the beginning of fourth grade for the standards that are going to be covered?
Okay.
So when we find that information, we know that there are going to be some children that know many of those. So we don't have to bother putting them in a group to relearn those standards. We would like to be able to accelerate them.
Correct.
Then in the winter, we're going to give the benchmark again, and we're going to see, hopefully, that most of our students are halfway through the year of the standards that are going to be taught. So we can really make real-time adjustments for our students and find out where are those gaps by using those benchmark assessments so that we can better meet the students where they are and then accelerate them so that they can be successful.
So the simple answer is you replace STAR with Link It.
We replace
For the-
STAR with a benchmark assessment
Yeah,
on
which
the
is, which in this one
standards.
happens to be Link It, right?
It's
Correct,
think
Peter.
it-
Yeah, okay. So that means that's good news because then we don't have to pay Renaissance for all that, right?
We don't have to pay Renaissance for all of the students, correct?
Right, okay. And it's listed as GPS, ELA, grade, math, grade, benchmark. That's the one we're talking about. Okay.
Correct,
And you're still delivering it 3 times a year? So
correct.
Can you just answer my last question, which is, when do you do let's take marking period 3, March 7 through June 10. When do you do the benchmark versus when is the SBA?
SBA is generally done in the spring and the benchmark is
Right, but
done
it's done when in the spring? So
March
you miss-
4th.
Yeah.
By
when-
March 4th, there's the window is open in the beginning of March.
So do you give that one after? the
No,
SBA?
before the SBA.
Well, if the windows, I'm confused because this is March 7th. If the window opens on the 4th, don't we do SBA? When do we do SBA?
SBA is done in the spring, right? A long window.
When do we tip? Yeah,
Mhm.
We need to use a microphone to do that, folks.
So SBA is generally given in May.
in May.
May.
And
in
then
May.
when do we give what replace STAR, the new Link It one?
It's going to,
Typically, it's going to be. And is it going to be, I'm interested in how far between that and the SBA. That was, I think, why.
Maybe a couple weeks, maybe 4 to 10 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks, depending on when the schools are administering the SBA.
You might want to make that more precise because parents are concerned about all this testing. So to the degree they don't understand why their kid just got tested and then they're back getting tested again, you might want to, I mean, we've gotten in this rhythm where people kind of understood, okay, I'm doing STAR. This is why I'm doing it. This is the reason I'm doing it. This is how much time there is between doing it. But, you know, you guys do whatever, I mean, you do what you think is right, but my advice to you would be if you're trying to achieve your goal of making it more clear to parents and what have you, you might want to just think about how you're going to administer that and, you know, come up with something that makes sense for instructing kids, which is why we're here. But that's something that parents can understand. Okay. Hey, thanks.
Just Dr. Francis, before you go, just a quick follow-up. I know Peter was talking about the savings from Renaissance. There's still limited uses of it, right?
Yes,
You're using it
that's
as a
correct.
screener when a student comes to the district. You're still using the math, the reading portion of it in some
For K1
circumstances.
and 2.
Okay, but obviously it's based on a per usage, I think, so there will be
Yes.
significant savings. That's
That is correct.
always nice to hear.
Mhm.
Right, and that'll be in the budget we see. Okay,
Correct.
Dr. Francis.
Is the Linkit nationally normed, or do we have any other tests that we're doing regularly on a yearly basis that we can compare to larger groups of kids?
I'm going to let Dr. Jones answer that question. Because Linkit, we're really using it as a data warehouse. So
So we don't have an assessment that would be considered like a nationally normed, like you do with Renaissance.
mhm.
But what we do have is pretty much primarily on the East Coast. There are a lot of other school districts that we're able to compare to. And they do comparison reports for us for high performing school districts, which, you know, I've used Renaissance for over 20 years. And I can honestly say that we get better data from Linkit because it's like districts that are like us.
It's regionally normed. At least
Yes.
It is some norming. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I had another question, but I don't know if you want to go to someone else first.
Actually, just wanted to follow up on that. I think one of the knocks we used to have on Renaissance is places that it was actually norming us again. So this sounds like it's a better situation. Dr. Francis, go ahead.
Other was, in terms of our new math curriculum, that has a digital component that has assessments within it and will keep track of how we're meeting the standards for each child. Is that something where at some point we're going to feel like we don't actually need to do then benchmark testing if you can actually have all that information centralized automatically?
I will defer to our math coordinator.
Over on the podium. So could you just repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, I mean, I know with some of the new digital tools that they're able to actually look at the standards and see which standards have been mastered by a particular student. And it seems like if you can have that by student, by grade, then by school, by district, I'm not sure then why you would need to have benchmark tests specifically if that information can already be gathered.
Yeah, so I guess my answer to that would be we're always trying to triangulate and get as many data points as possible. And the great thing about Linkit is it's a warehouse for all of our assessments. So even today I was running reports where I could compare SBA to Linkit form C, B, A, whichever one I decide. And so that affords us just an extra perspective. But not only that, it's helping us just double check that what we're getting is good information. As far as big ideas is concerned, you are correct. The students' performance and things will travel with them from grade to grade. So as we slowly adapt to this new system, this new program, we'll make our way through it and we'll see how that data really shakes out and how we can use it to inform instruction. But I think right now it's important to have both pieces going so that we can have a better understanding of, not only our students, but how the new program is actually working.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, one more, Ms. Stowe.
This is perhaps more related to ALP, Bonnie, but if you're now not using STAR, it looks like you've replaced NWAA, and then you're also still using the COGAT and of course your performance assessments. But then for science, you're also still doing a separate science group of testing, which I think makes sense. But we now have this block, a STEM block, right, in elementary school. So is that such that you could now test into math and not science? Or how are you going to differentiate if you're doing two different tests? Because I was under the impression those two were kind of getting grouped together again because of the block.
I'm gonna defer. Mr. D'Amico, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Would you like to answer that question about what we are doing for ALP, STEM, and math?
So last year definitely put us in an interesting position in that we cohorted our ALP students. As a result, what we found was that this was actually a very effective way of providing additional ALP instruction to our students. We're now looking at, and we're also kind of doing this in parallel with the ALP review. Now, I know at the last board meeting, there was a big discussion about what actually was the internal team doing with the ALP review and what types of recommendations would they be bringing forth. So that information will be brought forth to you in October. Now that we are teaming science and math, the simple answer is yes, we have to develop a mechanism that allows us to indicate that a student who would be successful in math would also be successful in the science criteria.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're probably going to want more on ALP, and we have that at an
Mhm.
upcoming meeting, and I'm
Yes.
sure there's some follow-up questions that will come from that.
Yep.
All right, why don't we move on then to the, yep, good.
So what did you do this year? For ALP testing kids into ALP? How did you, I mean, because that thing's teamed, to Ms. Stowe's point. How did you?
Mr.
Yeah, I mean, how
D'Amico?
did you identify that? Because, I mean, that means that kids, boy, that means kids who qualify for math, who might not qualify for science, what happened to them?
Mr. D'Amico?
So Peter,
Yeah.
you raise a good point. When we cohorted the students out of necessity for COVID,
Yeah.
certain students who did not qualify for one or the other discipline was awarded access to the program. Now
Yeah.
that wave of students will work themselves out in the next 2 years, but moving forward this year with the testing process, students will have to test into either the STEM block or the humanities block.
Whoa, Mark, I'm sorry, I didn't speak clearly. Those were actually 3 subjects under ALP. Those are not combined subjects. There was a subject, if I'm not wrong, someone just correct me. There was ALP English, which had social studies component to it. There was ALP math, and then there was multi-dis, interdis. Thank you, Dr. Francis. Right? Interdis is the thing that was effectively science.
Correct.
So we had 3, right?
Mhm.
What you guys are telling me is you combined math and science to create STEM, right? And if I'm not wrong, didn't we have kids who were testing? Was there a requirement to test into math to be in interdis? Could you be in interdis and not be in math?
Ms. O'Regan, do you want to speak to the past pathway into the ALP program, please?
And I'm trying to just draw the line from what was. I understand what happened in COVID. That was a special circumstance. I got that one. So then my question is, what did you do in 2022? So if you could crosswalk me from what you're doing in 2022 to what you were doing in 2020. I don't
think I need to
care
go
what happened in
back further
21
than
because 21 was a
2020.
special case. Let me back up. Ms. O'Regan, could you remind me how kids tested in and were assigned to
When we had
ELA
interdisciplinary
in
science.
2019, let's
2019.
go back, right?
Way back.
Right. How
to
was
before we
it,
did the
how was
push-up.
that done for ALP math and ALP interdis?
Students could be identified for pullout in ALP reading,
Uh-huh,
ALP math,
right.
or qualify for ALP interdisciplinary enrichment.
Okay. Were there, let me just interrupt just for a second, just so we can build this and move it along. Did we have students who had tested into interdis and not into math, or vice versa?
True.
Okay,
They were
So-
in,
okay. So,
but no student was in interdis without being in, they were in reading and interdis or math and interdis.
okay, so an interdis was where the science component was, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, roll the tape forward to this year. I don't want to know what happened last year,
Mhm.
this year. So this year, you don't have interdis anymore, correct?
We
You
are
combi-
teaching all of their science
In,
in, they have
in
ALP,
math,
in
in what
math,
used to, or you combine those two?
combined ALP, math and science. And instead of it being an enrichment interdisciplinary, it is the science.
Okay, so my question is, how did you evaluate students? How did a student qualify for that new STEM module this year?
For ALP STEM,
Right.
students qualified for ALP math.
So if you
And
were
they
in
were-
ALP math, you automatically were in what used to be called interdif.
Mhm. And we analyzed those students
So you
who,
reduced it down to one assessment. You used to do two assessments, right? One for interdis and one for math, and now you only
Well-
do math. Is that correct?
not two assessments, two sets of assessments.
Two sets of assessments. Thank you for the clarification, right? It's a multi-data point. Thank you for the
Yes.
reminder. So now it's, if you take math, you can get, okay. Well, you can't access science now unless you're testing in math. Is that correct?
Do you want to take the science
I mean, is
component?
that-
I'm going to defer to Tara because we've been talking about what
You
ALP
understand my
science looks
question,
like.
don't I?
Yes.
Can someone
What-
just simply answer?
Right. And so Tara and I have been talking about what ALP science looks like at the elementary level.
I think what you're noting is kind of a gap in general understanding of STEM and how someone with an affinity towards math would always have an affinity towards science, and we kind of bucketed that.
I always thought of those two things as some kids are able to do one and they may not be able to do the other at that level.
Mhm.
So that's the way I always thought of that. So that's the way I thought it would be three things, not two things.
Yeah, so when we combined interdis, aka science and math into STEM, a
Right.
student who once qualified in ALP reading would no longer qualify for ALP STEM and thus would be missing the science component of their ALP instruction. I think what you're noting is a possible gap in our pathway to ALP acceptance into that STEM category, because we'd want to provide anyone who shows affinity or advancement in science at the grade 2, 3, 4, or 5 level to be in some sort of an advanced science programming.
Yeah.
And if we're only bucketing that with a math placement, then we're missing that opportunity.
Could you, let me just stop this so we can move along. Can you guys, thank you so much for that. Can you guys be prepared, shouldn't say better, be prepared to discuss this in October? Because to me, this is like, the beauty of Greenwich Public Schools is the broadness of its ability to educate kids, you know, in a very moving towards an individualized way.
Yeah.
When you collapse like that, you're reducing those opportunities. To me, that's kind of going backwards against, and I understand why STEM, teach it together, co-teaching. I get why it's all in vogue.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, we're fortunate enough to now have a coordinator who's dedicated just to science. So my eyes are wide open to those gaps, and Bonnie and I are definitely working in partnership together to address that concern.
yeah, and maybe I was the only one. Maybe this is all new to me right here, right now. Maybe all of my other board members knew this, and I'm sorry if you guys already knew this and approved it. I just never remember being told this. And I'm all about instruction in kids, so this to me is much more important than
Yeah, we'll definitely look into this and address it in the
other
October meeting.
things. Yeah, if you could talk about that in October, that would really be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Hirsch.
I know I sent a whole bunch of questions, which I gotten answers to. The one I realized I wanted to ask a question was, are we doing any kind of assessments for social studies or humanities in the K-5 level? Because I didn't see that listed. This is my only question, since we're talking about qualifying for interdis.
Yes, we are. On the ELA side, we are doing our running records through our raskids.com. That's giving our kids our independent reading levels. That's happening 3 times a year. I did delete one of those. We were doing it 4 times a year. I felt it was better that we do it 3 times a year. That way we reducing one of the exams. And in terms of social studies, it's one of the things that we are working on, and that it's on my list to take care of.
Thank you.
All right, yes, we will now finally move on to the next discussion item, which is the Curriculum Institute update.
And Mr. Reed will kick us off.
All right. So I'm going to kick this thing off for us tonight. We've had a lot of action in math this summer, and I'm just going to take you through exactly what we did. So good evening. For those who don't know me, I'm Mike Reed. I'm the coordinator for mathematics K through 8. And over the next few slides, I'm going to lead you through the work we set out to accomplish this summer and what our next steps are for the 21-22 school year. But before I get started with that, I just need to give a special thanks to the 13 teachers that worked with me along with Dr. Todd White this summer, to New Lebanon School for graciously hosting us. What a wonderful facility to do some deep thinking. And then to Dr. Jones, Dr. Carabillo, and Mr. D'Amico for entrusting me to lead this work. And lastly, to you all for providing us with a much needed program, Big Ideas, to get us coherent across the district. So next slide, please. You could advance that. Yeah. So our goals for this summer in grades K through 8 were lofty, but we were extremely successful in accomplishing them. I'm going to highlight that work for you now. So in all courses, we created teacher curriculum documents, which provide staff with everything they need to deliver their math instruction. These documents will guide teachers on everything from lesson pacing to learning progressions to academic vocabulary. Specifically in grades 5, we created extension supports that aim at digging deeper into the understanding of on-grade level content. We also created accelerated supports to guide teachers when a student is ready for above grade level content, which is a bit of a change in our philosophy. We created report card reference guides, and those are designed to help teachers align the content that they're teaching to our standards-based report card in Aspen. It's a little bit funky when you try to put your grades in there as an elementary school teacher. So we created a companion document that just leads you right to it. And then finally, we executed a massive overhaul of Schoology, which was riddled with just all sorts of navigation issues and just dead static links. So we cleaned that all out. So it's very streamlined. In grades 6 through 8, we also created the teacher curriculum documents. We overhauled Schoology to improve navigation. And what I'm really excited about is our uniform assessments, which we created across all courses. So no matter what middle school you attend, you will be taking the same assessment by chapter. So we're excited about that. This year will be the year of the fraction. So our goal is to support students in their understanding of fractions. We're going to provide extra exposure to fraction concepts to improve what is historically a relative weakness in our district, grades 4 through 7. So middle school teachers identified opportunities to naturally enhance the work that we're going to be doing in Big Ideas. So it's a bit of a spiral review throughout the year. And then lastly, in an effort to mitigate, just loss of learning due to the circumstances over the last 2 years, the teachers identified prerequisite concepts to cover in launch units in grades 6 through 8 for each course. So, really the most exciting aspect of our new math resource is the coherence, like I said, that it brings. We're going to be aligned horizontally and vertically on everything from assessments to academic vocabulary. And every teacher has, common math resources K through 8. So we're really excited about it. Next slide, please. So a little bit redundant, but I wanted to be very clear about this because I know in the past I've worked on curriculum over the summers and we always had these robust goals and we never seemed to finish anything. This summer we took on a big heavy load and we completed everything. So it was a massive undertaking, and without the wonderful team of teachers and colleagues, we never would have gotten it done. So this is really kudos to them. So at this point I'll turn over just a little portion of the math presentation to my wonderful thought partner and facilitator of the advanced learning program, Bonnie.
Click again. So from grades 3 through 5, students in ALP math are expected to master all of the Common Core math standards from grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, and half of grade 7. This equates to a year and a half worth of standards every year. So what we did was in order to compact the curriculum, the team looked for redundancies and where possible grouped lessons from multiple grades standards together. For instance, the first unit in grade 4 is about place value. This place value is unit 7 in grade 3. So the lessons from these 2 units were compacted and streamlined for teachers and students. The team then mirrored the creation of the comprehensive inward-facing curriculum documents for educators that were created for the general education teachers. As part of this work, pre and post assessments were designed to assess these new units, the new compacted units. Report card reference guides were developed in which compiled the standards being taught during the course of the year for the full year and a half of curriculum. The report card inserts mirror the scoring categories on the report card as you would see for a general ed student. In Schoology, all teachers in the district have access to the grade level and the ALP curriculum side by side. So when the teachers open up, they see the general ed grade 3 curriculum, and then they see the very next line is the ALP grade 3 curriculum. And so all teachers have access to all of the materials. I'll turn it back over to Mike and talk about our future work.
Yes. So the next slide, I think, is just going to show you what was completed, and you can skip to the next slide. Thanks. So what comes next? That's the big question. So to reiterate, we have an aligned singular resource K through 8. This is a massive, massive win for us. We aim to implement big ideas, math with fidelity, and gather feedback often from teachers and buildings to inform our ongoing professional development. So we feel that it's paramount to be responsive to teachers and building needs so we can tailor our supports to them moving forward. As mentioned earlier, 6 through 8 will focus on fractions. K5, in case you're wondering, will be focused on mathematical vocabulary. We think this is a very high leverage point to get everybody on the same page, understanding the same language. So it's important to note, again, we have a philosophical change in instruction. Under previous administrations, when a student needed more rigor, teachers were asked to stay within grade level content. We called that going deeper or extension. We now have the ability to accelerate students by exposing them to content above grade level. Every teacher has access to every resource, K through Algebra 2. So it's wonderful. There's nothing to slow us down if kids can consume the content. Another wonderful aspect of Big Ideas is the built-in parent communication. We have family letters to kick off each unit, and we have embedded homework video supports accessible to entire families. So I hope you guys join me in my excitement for the new math program. I look forward to great things this year and collaborating with all stakeholders. And next up, we have Dr. Marcus. Oh, question, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Dr. Francis.
Actually, it's not a question. It's just to say one, it is worth, oh, I shouldn't say it that way. I am so excited to be on the board again to hear this. This is amazing. It doesn't matter. It was worth it to be here to hear this again. And I will just, the voice in the sky, I will just say one thing, which I think he'll understand, which is having accelerated pathways may be new to what's actually happening, but I don't think it's actually a new idea. But I am so incredibly happy to hear it's really happening.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So I want to add my thanks to you and the team for this. I happened to bump into Mr. D'Amico on the street this summer and bemoan the fact that for years, the board had a goal of getting more kids to complete algebra by 8th grade. And we were always stymied because we did all this work in middle school and we thought, that should speed them up. But I think this is telling me if we start earlier, if we start in kindergarten and 1st grade and we get those kids advancing, we'll have more kids in algebra by 8th grade. So that's your goal.
Yep, we have every resource we need to do that.
Sorry to join the parade, but I could see your excitement. And I have to say that I have kids that are already benefiting from this Big Ideas implementation. And I've never heard anyone say, but if you get something wrong, it explains it to you immediately in detail. And I've never heard children that excited about getting an answer wrong in math. So I just think that you've done something, you've got a great product here, and I'm excited for the future.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I personally am living it. I live in town and I have two young daughters that are, going to benefit from it as well. So personally and professionally, I'm excited about it. Okay, Dr. Marcus, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Marcus. I'm the interim coordinator for ELA and Social Studies K-8. I started very late in the summer when the work was already begun, and I walked into some incredible work by our teachers and our consultants. Next slide, please. You can fast forward it. Perfect. What I walked into is the creation of social studies end of unit mastery tasks on grades 6 through 8. These are document-based questions that align the curriculum across all the middle schools. So if I go into a 6th grade classroom, I'll be able to know what's going on in Eastern, Central, and Middle, and it's an equity issue. So I thought that was absolutely fantastic. The teachers created these, they work with consultants, and they're aligned perfectly to our curriculum. The same type of work was done on 6 through 8 for reading, the creation of unit overviews for the Readers Workshop program. These are basically overviews of our curriculum in terms of the reading and the standards and the materials, but it didn't go deep enough. And we'll get to that in the next slide. On grades K-2 and 3 to 5, that's where I was able to really grab hold of our standards, take a look at what our curriculum is, and do a crosswalk to make sure that Greenwich Public Schools were teaching every standard. We did find some gaps and we'll be addressing those. Next slide, please. Fast forward. So again, we completed the Readers and Writers Workshop Standards Inventory. We completed the end of unit mastery tasks on the middle school level, and we completed the end of unit overviews. But where do we go from here? That's the next step. So our focus for the 2021-22 school year is really on our middle school. What are we doing next? We are working with Todd White and Focused on Learning to develop standards-based daily reading and social studies lesson plans. We're also providing teachers with vetted materials and developing aligned companion common assessments for each unit of study. Now, the question is, why are we doing this? And there's a lot of reasons. First and foremost, one question is that I've received, why can't we buy something off the shelf? Well, the publishers tailor their materials to large states, specifically New York, Texas, California, Connecticut. We would have to do this work anyway. There's nothing that is fully aligned to what we do here in Connecticut. More so, there's nothing aligned to what we do here in Greenwich. So we're going to have to do this valuable work anyway. More importantly, the teachers are excited about this because what these lesson plans are doing is they're equating all the middle schools together. They're saying that when I walk into an ELA class in Eastern Middle School, I will see generally the same type of lesson in Central and Western. But we're still giving teachers freedom. We're giving them a foundation of a lesson plan, which they can then tailor and differentiate for the students in front of them. Teachers have been very excited about this. On August 30th, we had a large meeting. They gave us their lesson plans. They're excited for the work. They've given us samples. We want to include their voice in this throughout this entire process. There's teacher voice, there's parent voice. I'm sorry, I can't breathe in this. It's hard. When you come up here, you'll see this is fun. Through the curriculum advisory councils, the work will be presented to the committees so they can really evaluate what's being done. We're asking for feedback at every level. So our hope is to implement this work starting in January with full implementation by the end of the year. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Bonnie, for the ALP correlation.
It was a big year, a big summer for the ALP program. Thanks to you. The focus of the summer work in language arts was the redesign of the grades 3, 4, and 5 ALP reading units to integrate both writing and social studies instruction. By using the standards as the lens, the team analyzed the primary curriculum programs, determined if all the Common Core standards were being addressed by cross-referencing the William and Mary gifted units, the Readers and Writers Workshop, along with the standards. From this analysis, the team created comprehensive inward-facing curriculum documents for educators that cover all grade level material while providing compacting and extended learning opportunities. The curriculum documents include horizontal progressions of skills within each grade level with spiraling, and the vertical progression of concepts and skills for grades 3 through 5. Paired pacing guides show the parallels between the core curriculum and the ALP curriculum. And the team has begun the work on the creation of the integrated UDL-based daily lesson plans for each of the grade 3 through 5 ALP language arts and social studies units. Like the work done for math, documents are organized in Schoology so that teachers in the district have access to grade level and ALP curriculum documents side by side. Next slide. You can see we got quite a bit accomplished this summer in elementary. And this, however, the elementary and the middle school curriculum is going to be continued to be re-examined and enhanced over the next few years in conjunction with Dr. Marcus.
Are there any questions?
Hi. So I have a couple of questions regarding just the redesign of the program. So you said that there'll be lesson plans and materials available for teachers across all the middle schools with respect to English, but teachers will also have freedom to teach. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, what materials will they have access to, and how will it be uniform across all 3 middle schools when in fact they have certain freedoms, which obviously by policy we have, but I just want to understand that a little bit better.
That's a great question. So I remember when I was a teacher, and there are a lot of responsibilities throughout the course of the day. Not only do we have to teach our classes, but we have to have constant parent communication. We have to have our meetings. We have to have our SAT meetings. There's not a lot of time to really build those robust standards-based lesson plans. So what we're doing is we're providing a foundation of lesson plans, daily lesson plans. We're getting them to that end goal where they will have 160 plus lesson plans that they can then differentiate for the students in front of them. Now, we also said to our teachers, if you have a similar lesson plan that addresses the standards and the skills and is accompanied with vetted resources, then please feel free to implement that lesson plan as long as it is perfectly aligned to where you should be in the curriculum based on the lesson plans that we provided. The lesson plan that we provided is making an equal playing field for all students, all teachers across all the middle schools.
So just going to the word that you used, materials that have been vetted, who vets them?
So that is a great question. I'm currently in the process of working with Dr. Jones, Dr. Carabillo, and Mr. D'Amico in creating a process for that exact issue.
So in essence, would the design be that a teacher is able to grab a lesson plan from the warehouse and then decides that it would be great to supplement it with some various articles that they found? Do you mean those articles would then have to be vetted through a process, a committee within the administration before they could be actually used in the classroom?
So first, the lesson plans do come with companion materials that are vetted by our incredible team of nationally renowned curriculum writers. So if they feel that they need to supplement it, then they would need to use the process that we're in the process of creating right now.
So what is the timeline for which that process would be created? And the reason, the backdrop to these questions, and I appreciate that you came, you're new to the Greenwich schools since July, but there's obviously been a lot of discussion in the last year about transparency in curriculum and in fact how it gets implemented and who is approving it, and that there has been a wide variety of disparity between what is being taught from one school to the next, and to just have a general sense of how this process is going forward. So if there's going to be a process, which I like the idea of the process being vetted, what is the timeline by which that would be implemented?
We are working on creating that process right now, and I'm hoping to have it done to Dr. Jones within the next couple of weeks.
Mr. Chair.
Dr. Marcus.
Dr. Marcus, welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
There was something you said that I wasn't quite sure I understood. And so you were talking about buying a social study curriculum, right? Did I hear you say that correctly? And you had a reason why we couldn't or shouldn't do that?
Correct.
Okay, and remind me again what the reason was? I want to be sure I heard it correctly.
So the publishers gear their materials to the large states and their standards. They don't gear materials to the smaller states because there's not that much of a market for it. That's
Okay,
why we
I'm-
have to work within our standards to create materials that are aligned properly and rigorous enough for our students.
Okay, so that confuses me a little bit for two reasons. Okay, or a couple different reasons. In Greenwich, and I realize you're new here, so this may come as like, hey, I've never heard that before. In Greenwich, we've always worried about the success of our district.
Mhm.
We're resourced enough where we can kind of do things that other districts can't do, right? We can do a summer curriculum institute. Most districts can't afford to do that, right? We got in a place where we were writing our own curriculum, and I always thought that was a little not a good use of resources, but that's a personal opinion. You know, you could argue that either way. But we did it because we're a rich district, so we can afford to do it. You know, most other districts in the country, 95% of the districts in the country cannot afford to do that. So the challenge of blessings, I guess. I always understood, however, that we always wanted to align our ELA and our math curriculum and our science curriculum very tightly to the standards that our state's using, which is the Smarter Balance standards. They're using the Common Core, but then of course it's aligned to the assessment. What are they testing in each standard, right? So we did that in those three subjects. But then there are other subjects where we're not running those kinds of tests. So all of a sudden we have degrees of freedom that we wouldn't necessarily have in those three subjects. One of them being, as an example, history/social studies, which is, I think, what Common Core calls it.
Mhm.
And they set a series of standards. So the thing that puzzles me is I've also known, because we're a small state, a really small state, that we have to draft off what everybody else is doing, right? Educationally, and we do. Because up at the State Department of Education, they don't have just this massive amount of resources to do it. So my point would be is if we don't have to worry about the testing, but we like the Common Core standards, there is no doubt there are publishers who are developing incredible amounts of content aligned to the Common Core standards for history/social studies, because in the consortium we're in, which is SBAC, but it doesn't really matter. We're not testing for that. There are large states. SBAC, I think, has taken over the other one in terms of more states using it than anybody else. So I'm a little bit puzzled why we wouldn't. We've had a lot of challenges, and I'm leaving the board, but for all of you who are in that English language arts and social studies realm, you know, we need to educate kids. We need to not invite controversy on a curriculum. So to the degree that there is something out there that is exceptionally well developed, can go through the incredible process that just properly went with what Mike was doing in math and the other people were doing in math. A lot of other people participated in that. You should talk to them about how they ran that review to select a set of materials. It seems to me to go find something that's non-political, that's what our kids need, and get that so that it provides all these resources to teachers. I have watched this last year, we had, in the span of 3 weeks, 6 separate episodes where there were things being taught in classrooms that were just way out of bounds. Okay. And it happened because Mark D'Amico's predecessor had followed a strategy that said, oh no, teachers, this is where I'm gonna draw the line. I just set the standards. You teachers go figure out your lesson plans. You go figure out your materials. And it infuriated me because that strategy failed. And it failed spectacularly, where we wound up in the front page of, you know, news. It was everywhere. And the point of it was, those teachers, I thought, had been abandoned. They had to go out there and find their own content. There's no reason we should put teachers in that place. So I know you guys are going down, which I think, by the way, I want to applaud you, going down the right track, which is to go, wait a second, stop this nonsense. We need to get back to the standards. We need to give them what to do week by week.
Yes.
If they choose to adjust for their classroom, terrific. And that's where they should have the freedom to hone their craft. But in terms of the content that they have, I'm wondering why we shouldn't go out, get something really terrific like the math stuff we just bought, provide that to teachers, particularly K-8. The high school is a whole special case. It's a very special case. But at least to establish that, put these tools in their hands, spend whatever it costs to do that. I mean, if we needed to ask for $1 million to go do that, we could convince people to spend $1 million on that. And now we're giving to teachers kind of a standardized thing. It's standardized. It's fully integrated horizontally, vertically. Every school's teaching it the same. Hopefully it's non-political. So scrub that out and just go teach kids history and social studies. And it seems to me you have the degree of freedom because we are detached from a standardized test coming from the state on that. It provides much more freedom of movement for you guys to go forward. What's wrong with that strategy, and what am I missing in that thinking?
Well, you've actually summed up the exact reason why we need to give our teachers these daily vetted lesson plans.
Yes.
More importantly, there is no social studies curriculum that is built in Connecticut that addresses the Connecticut units. And we actually have on Todd White's team, we have some of the people that actually helped write some of the Connecticut standards that are involved in this work. There is no curriculum out there right now that addresses, for example,
Why do we care about the Connecticut standards?
Because there's Connecticut units that we have to teach specifically about Connecticut history, with history of Greenwich. Those are units that are built into our curriculum right now.
Those ones I understand. I was talking about everything but Connecticut specific history.
So
Were you just talking about the Connecticut specific history?
Connecticut history that happens in all of our grades, also across units. Additionally, even in the big box states with the publishers, individual districts still have to align that curriculum to the standards, to the needs of the district. Each district requires different things, and our district is incredibly diverse. And we need to make sure that whatever we use is aligned to the needs, not just of our state, but of our students. And that's why the work that Todd White's team, myself, and teaming up with my co-curricular coordinators is vital, because we're really creating a unique Greenwich-based curriculum.
Dr. Peter, we're gonna go on to somebody else. Peter, you've been talking for a while. So Dr. Francis, you had your hand up.
So in a prior conversation a couple of years ago, one of the things that had come up was in the process of giving sort of equivalent to the concept of the lesson plans, but you would have potentially books that kids are reading or articles that kids are reading. And the question was, do you provide a range of options that would be appropriate sort of reading level? So I knew there was like Newsella that was used at one point for specific things, but beyond that, if they're reading memoirs or if they're looking at the Civil War or whatever it might be, might you have different level materials that would be appropriate for different reading levels that would still all be on the same topic, so they could have conversations about the same things, but having read things that were at the appropriate level?
That's exactly what's happening.
Before I jump into a question or two, I just wanted to say, I can't tell you guys how impressed and thrilled I was when I read this update. I think our new team of curriculum coordinators is incredibly fantastic, and how well that they have worked with the curriculum coordinators that we have already here. And all of the things and topics and issues I had brought forward to you, Dr. Jones, as suggested goals when I sat down with Dr. Marcus, he outlined for me. There are things that we're already working on, aligning things horizontally and vertically so our students have a progression from K to 12 with lesson plans and support for our educators and parents at home as well. I can't tell you how thrilled I am. So thank you. I did want to ask though, I know we talked about, I was looking at the math text, big ideas, which is incredible. I'm wondering if we're looking to do anything once we get to our high school, for the textbooks at the high school to support their improvements there, as well as the science program. Because I know the report discussed on many occasions budget impact, especially in our world of science, elementary, onward, middle, and upwards. I know part of the curriculum advisory committee's work this summer, this year will be focusing on some of that. So I was wondering sort of where we're going to be going with that.
Can you restate your question? I'm not sure.
I think my question is more based on budget. If we're going to be looking at budget planning to support some of that work that needs to happen in those areas. I'm sorry.
I might just say, because we were not at that 2% level last year, we did build in curriculum, money this year, which has made all the difference in the world, because we have that 650,000 that it took to plan for big ideas. And so the team has been working on making sure we have a strategy so that the implementation of content areas matches the budget cycle. So, because you can't do, for instance, if you tried to do math and ELA in the same year, it is so expensive that we know that we can't sustain that. And I think that's one reason we got so far behind, where, math was 10 years old, because every summer we were trying to do everything and we weren't on the same a cycle that we actually could afford within the budget. So I think we're in a much better spot going into next year's budget than we have been in quite a while.
I look forward to hearing more about that when we hear about our budget ideas for next year. And I guess, I know the work that's going to be done by the Curriculum Advisory Council this year is also going to support all of the additional work done by the summer over the Summer Curriculum Institute. Are there any other things left over from the Summer Curriculum Institute that you're going to be bringing forward to work on through this year, including, additional needs of materials or vetting, other work?
All that's being worked on with Todd White and focused on learning, myself and our team. And we hope to have everything ready for the council by January. I'm sorry, by October.
Well, I look forward to that meeting. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think you have more to the presentation. So if you want to move on to the next. Thank you.
All right, on to science. So again, hi, Tara Fogel. Nice to meet everybody. I'm your science program coordinator for kindergarten through 8th grade. And what I'm going to be going over today is the 3 buckets of work that my team worked on during the Science Curriculum Institute. We had middle school teachers, 1 elementary school teacher, and 1 high school teacher working with us during the Summer Institute. The first of the 3 buckets of work were the advanced science pathways. What we did was create 4 developmentally appropriate and conceptual storylines for each grade level. Our 4 pathways are taught in parallel to the robust Stanford-based curriculum that we have. We leverage the advanced grade level expectations and student choice and project creation in creating the advanced pathways. Once we finished up that work in the advanced pathways, we moved on to our next bucket of work, which was addressing some student, parent, and teacher concerns regarding the level of detailed feedback that our students were getting in their science classes. We're doing all of this with the intentional purpose of encouraging more of a growth mindset. So what we did is we took our existing rubrics and we aligned them to the science and engineering practices. We want students to figure out what skills they may be lacking, where their gaps are in understanding, and then address those themselves by analyzing their rubrics. We design these to encourage revision over time and improvement throughout their school year. Now, we know it's not enough just to look at the 6-8 grade band where our focus area was for this summer. So we did incorporate help from the elementary and high school levels. So we looked at vertical alignment. And first we looked at the 3-5 grade level and wanted to increase data literacy with our elementary students. We did this through increasing opportunities to grapple with complex data sets using Tuva, one of our digital platform partners. We also wanted to improve that sticky transition band of grade 8 to grade 9 as our middle school students transition to Greenwich High. Here, we wanted to increase the number of nonfiction text sets and exposure at the 8th, 7th, and 6th grade levels. So we created those resources for our students. We can go on to the next slide. So as we're encouraging this growth mindset on the board, you're going to see 8 different graphics. These are the science and engineering practices that we wanted students to grapple with over the year or their 3 years in the middle grade band and get used to looking at. You can go next. So this intentional use of branding in our documents allows for discourse, peer-to-peer discourse, teacher-to-peer discourse, teacher-to-student discourse, and conversations with parents as students bring their grade books back to their parents using the Aspen and parent portal. We also do this because we want to see revision and continued sense making. In science at the middle level, it's not one and done. Our students constantly revise and change their thinking over time as they're presented more evidence and learning experiences. If you go next on the slide, you'll see a sample rubric. Here you can see this is one practice. Students are asked to engage in argument from evidence. On this practice rubric, you'll see that there's a place for students to meet expectations, exceed expectations, or get constructive feedback from their teacher. All of this verbiage is aligned to the standards and grade level band expectations in 6-8. You can go to the next slide. Now our focus, as I said, was also on the transitional years. On the slide now, you'll see a picture of one sample text set. We invited down an honors bio teacher to come work with our middle school staff. She looked at the phenomena that we were using in instruction and found leveled text to help students grapple with nonfiction at a higher reading level. She went ahead and modified those up, down, provided them in different languages, and additional supports for all learners in our classrooms. So we have multiple text sets for every phenomena in all 12 units at the middle school science. And if you go one more time, we also looked at data literacy, as I said earlier. What you see on the screen is a GIF from Tuva. This is how students can manipulate data and look at text sets. We know that data analysis and having data literate students is important as we move forward. And we believe that it is developmentally appropriate to start this in demonstration mode as early as grade 3. So we've provided supports grades 3, 4, and 5, and then move towards independence in 6, 7, and 8. You can go one more slide. Now, this isn't where we're ending. We're always moving forward. So Mike, you can follow along with me as I talk. The first thing we're going to look at is the Aspen grade book. We switched this up in the middle school this year. Our students are now going to see 8 categories for assignments. Every assignment is listed as a science and engineering practice. So as a student, I'm no longer saying I failed this homework assignment. I'm saying I'm grappling with data analysis. I need more practice here. And we gave students the ability to go back and take that feedback to their teachers and parents. Their grade book and report cards now mean something to them intellectually. You can go one more. We're also looking at continued targeted professional learning for our teachers. Teaching this way and reminding teachers that having discourse like this doesn't always come naturally. So we're working on that with our teachers using Program Wednesdays as I do some targeted professional learning at the middle level. One more. We're also continuing to look at the advanced science. We'll reflect and revise as needed. This is the first year it's instructed this way, so we're always going to look for feedback from our students, parents, teachers, administrators, and the stakeholders here. And it doesn't end in the middle school. We'll be moving down after this bucket of work. We're going to continue to look at K-5. We know we want to embed performance assessments that have a similar rigor to what we've made at the 6-8 level. And furthermore, the 5th and final, we're also looking at assured experiences district-wide. We know that through the lens of science, there's a lot of opportunities at the K2, 3, 5, and 6-8 grade band, and a fresh set of eyes on our assured experiences could be just the right thing. We're doing this all in the hopes of continuing being partners in learning and working as students make sense of the natural world and help us to make their thinking visible. Last piece. And that's it. And to Adrian. Oh, questions?
Yep, Ms. Downey.
Okay, let's make sure this on.
falling apart here. Thank you, Tara. I just had a question. In the report, I was a little concerned because we were talking about challenges and it talked about the budget constraints, that support for the science program has decreased by approximately 75% over the last 5 years. I don't know if you're just talking about the professional development or if it goes beyond that. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it actually makes more sense when we look at this from the picture that Dr. Jones was saying. As we know, there's different areas of focus in our curriculum management plan. So 5 years ago, where science was a heavy focus, we put a lot of effort in these summer curriculum institutes to create this middle school curriculum that is super robust right now. This was the last year that that's happening at the 6-8 level. So while we finished everything up for 6-8, we know that we hope to see it cycle back to the K-5 science, which you'll see when we present the curriculum management plan in October. It does pop back up in the cycle.
Okay, so you're only really referring to the curriculum development part, not to the actual instructional materials or what we're doing in the classroom.
Correct.
Excellent.
We have forecast our budget for instructional materials to make sure students have what they need.
Thank you.
Dr. Francis.
Can you be more specific about how advanced science is advanced? There's been a lot of discussion in the past about different ways of doing this. Is there a way to model what's happening with math where you could actually be looking at high school material that you bring into the middle school? What kinds of things are making this more advanced at the material or subject level, not sort of just sort of the depth of thinking?
Yeah, I kind of lean into what Mike had said. We don't want advanced to mean more. We want advanced to be different and truly accelerating our students' learning. So we had our teachers, myself, an instructional coach, create these pathways, and each of them is different for each unit. They live in parallel. So it's a different project that students are doing. The first level of advancement is using the high school level or 9-12 grade band as their rubric expectations. So again, their rubrics are graded with one of the 8 science and engineering practices. We no longer take the language from 6-8, we take it from 9-12.
From the NGSS standard?
From the SGN, yeah. And those SEPs, or the science and engineering practices, live throughout the disciplines of earth, physical, and life science. So it doesn't really attend to that content, it's just the skill.
All right, thank you.
Adrian.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tara. I'm Adrienne Hirsch-Klein. I'm the K-12 Program Coordinator for ESOL and World Language. Even though my section tonight focuses on K through 8, I do look at World Language and ESOL from a K-12 perspective, and I work closely with Christina Shaw at the high school for the World Language piece. So I'll be focused on K-8, but I am still very integrally involved in 9-12, along with Christina, who will talk more specifically about high school world language a little bit later in this presentation. So as you've heard from my colleagues so far, our goal as an academic team is to create and facilitate updated curricular unit outlines and summative assessments, as well as provide parents with access to parent-friendly unit overviews of curriculum based on what our students are learning in class. So even though several of our teachers were very exhausted, and legitimately so, after a long year of COVID, we were able to assemble a small team of world language teachers, actually K-12, who collaborated on a number of to-dos over the summer. So we're happy to report that we created a set of parent-friendly unit overviews of the K-5 FLES curriculum that are now posted on the website. We also updated the 2nd and 3rd grade FLES units in Spanish so that they thematically align to the upper elementary grade levels, including developing common summative projects that are common to all 11 elementary schools. At the middle school level, now that our level language courses are being offered again, because you may remember last year, native and advanced and on-level tracked world language classes were collapsed as a result of cohorting. We had some work to do this past summer to update the scope and sequence of our curriculum in the Spanish native and non-native units, along with French, since we do offer advanced French here at Central, to account for the content and language skills that several of our teachers were unable to cover last year as a result of the way we were cohorted and not cohorted according to language level and proficiency last year. Regarding French, we also updated our scope and sequence, including developing common curricular unit outlines in the 7th and 8th grade levels. Next slide, please. Moving forward, there's a bit of work to do in all of our curricular areas. In the interest of time, I'll just highlight a couple of priority next steps within FLES and middle school world language. So the implementation of updated FLES units and the need to make any revisions to our curriculum and the assessments will be monitored through frequent walkthroughs by administrators, myself, as well as through formal and informal observations. With regard to the middle school world language curriculum in Spanish and French, one charge this year is to create parent-friendly overviews of our native and non-native Spanish and French units that will eventually be posted on the website. And finally, as we keep listening and responding to feedback from our school community, we are working toward continuing to create common summative assessments in world language so that we can be consistent in how we monitor how students progress in the content and the language proficiency they are aiming to acquire. Any questions? Preguntas? I was translating in the back, by the way, so I'm sorry if there was a little noise during other people's presentations.
No worries. All right. Thank you.
I will turn it over to now the high school. It's a good segue since high school is a soft spot for me, to Andrew Byrne, who will address math.
Thank you, Adrian. Good evening, Dr. Jones, Chairman Bernstein, Board of Education. My name is Andrew Byrne, and I'm the Folsom House Administrator and also oversee our math and computer science program at the high school. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the math department tonight. It has been a long-standing practice of the Greenwich High School Math Department to audit our more than 25 courses on a monthly basis. We do this for two reasons. One, it ensures that we're being consistent across teachers, that we're maintaining proper pacing, and that we're meeting the daily needs of our students. And two, it allows us to identify areas in the curriculum that need to be reviewed and refined to meet our students' needs prior to the start of the next school year. As a result of our findings last year, we spent time this summer working on the following courses: Algebra 1, Geometry, Honors, and Regular Pre-Calculus. In addition, time was spent creating both the inward and outward facing curriculum documents that you heard about tonight. And we also did some work around adopting new additions for our Algebra 2 honors classes and our advanced calculus program. Next slide. Moving forward, we'd like to continue this important work while exploring the use of standardized benchmarks in our Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 courses. And we're looking to strengthen our vertical and horizontal alignment through the use of our PLC, collaboration time, and department time. At Greenwich High School, we're fortunate to have 28 teachers who take this work very seriously each day. They're constantly thinking about ways to innovate and create and challenge our students. And I'm very grateful for the work that they've done both this summer and the work that they'll do this coming year to continue this fine work. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Dr. Francis.
Two things, and these are sort of, I think, more comments than questions. But I don't know if anybody's thought about this more, but one of the things about our advanced calculus course that's a little tricky for kids is if they do that as seniors, it can be hard to figure out what math level to go into when they go to college because it's not a full multivariable course, because it's missing a piece of that. I know some of the kids who are able to do that as juniors then spend that time after AP exams to kind of finish out that coursework. But I'm not sure if that's something that the school could think about a little bit more in terms of how to address that particular deficit and sort of flush that out. I'm not expecting really an answer.
No, I appreciate the feedback. I am also new to our curricular team here, and I will say that has been identified as a need and something that we will, in the coming months and years, be looking more closely at. So thank you for that.
And then the other thing, both of my kids went through the high school. So as I said earlier, I'm an old timer. The other thing that we had talked about a little bit more, it was Matt Myers when he was there doing a lot of the computer science work is, so exciting that when my older son first got to the high school, they didn't actually run AP computer science, and they didn't really have any computer science courses. So it's really expanded dramatically. But one of the things that both of my kids did, which I would love to see more support for this and more resources so kids can find this without having parents who spend a lot of time doing it, is, having a place where they can look to see where are other courses they could take if they have a particular interest beyond even taking the courses that are now available. So both of my kids, for example, took online courses at ASU or did other kinds of things. And I think it would be really great to have a resource center where kids who may not be aware of these possibilities or these options could do this, because they both ended up doing an independent study with teachers from the high school and those kinds of things. And I just think in general, it's a really great thing for us to think outside the box for kids of particular interest, but it would be great to have a resource at the high school where kids could go and say, I'd really love to do something else. Who's done something like this before? What are some options? How do you go about doing it? And I think it would be really nice to have that at the high school.
Thank you. Our computer science program is booming at the high school, and enrollment's at an all-time high. And we do see our students accomplishing many wonderful things, both in our classrooms and outside in some of our clubs and activities. But your point is very well made. Thank you.
Ms. Stowe.
I was going to say, I heard a lot of people couldn't get into the computer science classes this year, so it must be booming. But it's just real fast. We're talking so how Big Ideas is such a success, and I see here that it's been 10 years since we've had new textbooks at the high school. Is this something we're going to be seeing in the next budget cycle, I hope?
Yes. Yeah, no, we definitely want to build off the work that Mr. Reed and his team did. I was part of that committee last year, and we're excited about the opportunities that may exist either with Big Ideas or potentially other programs in the future. So.
Ms. Hirsch.
Along those lines, actually, one of the things that impressed me so much about Big Ideas was how there was so much support for students to reteach or learn or help parents help their students at home built into that program. Is that something that we're going to be able to be looking at? I know it's not Big Ideas, but once students get to the high school level, it's interesting that Gaetan brought up calculus. If your student is in calculus, especially, the higher levels of calculus, there's often not many people that can help support your student if they're struggling or having issues at home with homework. I, for one, cannot help my child with calculus. My husband does, uses it for a living and was not even able to help with AP, BT calculus. So I don't know if that's something that we're going to be looking into to try to create some of those resources at the high school level as well, to sort of support, through curriculum work or whatever, added support for students at home to reteach or learn when they're having difficulty with a subject.
Yeah, I think we're constantly looking for those resources. I'll be honest with you, there's very few of them that are out there right now. There are some of the publishers are now expanding into the high school, so Big Ideas is being one of them. We are fortunate. We do use a lot of Khan Academy, and there's a lot of resources out there through MIT and some other various universities that have freeware. So that's all coming, and it's something that we're hoping to implement in the coming years.
And the last question is, I know this was not just necessarily at the high school, but are we going to be able to have some support online, I should say on our website, for when the math curriculums go up in case a parent does need to try to help support math or science curriculum at the high school level and others?
I'm hoping the outward public facing documents that were created this summer will be super helpful for that, but that will just be a starting place. And I think we need to continue to do more to communicate and inform folks about how to access those supports.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sharon.
I never really understood this, and maybe you can help explain it to me. I hear parents say, oh, well, they don't have resources, they don't have support, what have you, right? All the curriculum maps and all the content, that's all in Aspen, and it's accessible. So that was one. Sounds like you guys have someone made a decision on the way to get it out of Aspen and go put it in a separate tool. Okay, fine. We don't really care what the tool is. And then it's all in school. This stuff's all in Schoology, correct? Yes. Right? So if you're at the high school at the beginning of the year, if you want to know what your kid's doing, go over and ask them to access the kid's Schoology account, and it's in there. Right? No, why? Why?
It's in Schoology accessible.
Sorry.
But you can see all the stuff from the class, yes.
Right. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Or there's some classes where we're posting that stuff in blocks, like we only do to the first marking period, or is it?
If you're asking about curriculum guides, those are not accessible in Schoology to students.
No, but my point was the, Ms. Orecko, Dr. Orecko, doctor? No,
Lucy's fine.
Lucy, as, I tend to call people by their first name when I know they know them, but anyway, the thing that puzzles me is you'll hear parents say, I don't know what my kid is being taught. I don't know what's coming. I can't see it. And I understand we don't issue Schoology IDs. We issue them to children. We don't issue them to adults, to parents, I should say. Let me be precise. We issue them Aspen IDs. But my point is if a parent wants to know what a kid's going to go through, right? Or they want that, let's say, to give it to if they're getting an outside tutor, or they're getting outside help, or they're going to go look for supplement like Coursera or some other Khan Academy or what have you. It's published in Schoology, is it not, for every class, what the kid's going to do, units of study for the full year? Is that correct? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, it depends on the teacher, how far ahead that would be posted. A teacher may have the, next week's work on Schoology versus another teacher who might have the next 2 days versus another who might be so planned out, they have the next month on Schoology. So that really depends.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lucy, I wasn't being precise. I wasn't asking the when of the timing, but like a syllabus for a class in college, it says, here's what we're going to cover, right? And here are going to be the units of study, right? Presumably that standard is put on, I don't know what the front page of Schoology is, but every teacher would put that out there, wouldn't they? Say, this is what we're going to cover this year. This is the textbooks we're going to use. Is that wrong, or is that?
That's correct.
So that's the standard at the high school, right?
That's right. That would be found in the syllabus, which would be provided, and it give the unit overview for each of the units of the course.
Okay, so a real issue is for some parents is if they're saying, I don't know what my kid, it's just not put in a place that's readily accessible to them without going and asking their individual child, correct?
I think the public facing curricular documents are going to really aid
Fix
in
that
that,
part.
because that's right,
Right,
because
yeah.
it'll provide the depths that perhaps you're hearing about. That they're not.
I heard people walk around and say, well, none of this stuff is available. And I always thought, what? But you guys have corrected me. Thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Francis.
We like to answer questions as a team also.
That's okay. Good to have a team, strong team. Dr. Francis.
Sorry, indulge me on one more thing, which is in the computer science department. I don't know if this is the case still, but I know historically and sort of across the country, it can be difficult to get enough computer science teachers. One of the things we had worked on a little bit when my kids were there was a lot of the students end up doing tutoring as part of their honors requirements. And one of the suggestions and what we ended up being able to do was actually have one of my kids go in and help teach one of these courses because it had a particular ability in computer science. And I think that's a resource that you guys should think about for kids who are particularly advanced to help expand some of these availabilities for other students if you're feeling a little short on teachers.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it's a challenge throughout the country is to find these educators that have this qualification. I will say we were highly successful this year with hiring 2 new computer science teachers. And I'll also say that our group called Girls Who Code, I have 2 daughters that are part of that program, and they're doing a lot of the very work that you mentioned, pushing into not only classes at the high school, but more so even at the elementary school. So it's really catching on, and I think we're doing really good work around that.
And then we're going to move on.
Just as an aside, in response to what Mr. Scher was saying is, a lot of the layout for coursework at the high school level may be available in Schoology, but oftentimes it's through a student's Schoology account. It was always my understanding that our staff did not want parents to access their students' accounts for multiple reasons. But I don't know if they're available necessarily in the parent portal on Schoology, but I know we're trying to sort of make sure that there's a one-stop shop, and that's why I was asking specifically if they were going to be put on our website in the outward-facing documents that you were speaking about. It's not that people can't access them or find them, but oftentimes they're not necessarily in the parents section of the Schoology. So just to clarify what I was asking, for that kind of support.
And they will be there, and I think you'll really enjoy and appreciate the template that we use. It's very clear across all our programs what it is that we're trying to do with our students.
All right, thank you. Who's the next program?
Happy to introduce Bridget Berry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Bridget Berry. I'm the Sheldon House Administrator and in charge of the English program. Just to go over our key accomplishments from the summer work. In a great migration, we moved all of our documents from the Aspen Aspen maps to Schoology documents, so that we have the inward facing documents for all teachers. And in the moving, we improved them considerably. We focused on vertical and horizontal alignment, especially grammar study and a clear progression of skills acquisition. In addition, all the courses were aligned with Common Core standards. You could think, weren't they already aligned? Yeah, sure, of course they were. We worked from that, but when we put them in the maps, we pretty much put all the standards. Because if you're teaching an English class, well, you're teaching reading, you're teaching writing, you're teaching speaking. It seemed like all of them are applicable, but that became a very diffused responsibility. And where could you point to where it was actually going to be covered, taught, targeted? So as we put them into the standards into the courses in our new curriculum guides, we actually sorted power standards and targeted which unit would be responsible for that standard. So it's a little more accountability. Our next steps in the work on this work that we started this summer is that teachers will be able to comment directly on the documents. When they were in the maps, you couldn't make a direct comment, but in the Schoology, they're Google Docs in essence, and teachers can work on them through the year and collaborate on them. We're going to leverage the PLCs and collaborative blocks so that teachers can look through and say, this worked well, this didn't work, consider adding this, and so on. So that will give us a much more chance to make them interactive documents and to continue that work. Also, those inward-facing documents will give teachers all the available resources for their core texts and for any other materials. As a program administrator, I will support this throughout the course of this year, this onward going work by seeing the curriculum in action in regular rotation through classes. I will get feedback from the PLCs and from the collaborative groups, meet frequently with our department coach, who's in all the classes, and with the LFs. And we will continue discussions in our regular program meetings every month. Any questions?
No, that means awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, my great partner, Lucy Orecko.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lucy Orecko, the Program Administrator for Social Studies. I'm also the Bella House Administrator. I'm very excited to tell you about our work from the summer. We had a great team of social studies teachers making updates to our curriculum guides. We're actually very lucky in the social studies department in that it has always been the tradition to maintain inward-facing documents in social studies. So we actually already had all of our curriculum guides housed in Schoology for our teachers to access. We also did maintain that information in the Aspen maps. However, our teachers always found the curriculum guides more user-friendly and preferred those. So we did always continue to update those curriculum guides in Schoology. So as you can see from the slide, there were various courses where we focused on the enduring understandings and essential questions. If you're not familiar with those terms, enduring understandings are really the big ideas of a unit. The essential questions sort of are the objectives of the lessons that get to those big ideas or enduring understandings. So we really took a close look at those across various courses. We also started creating outward facing documents specifically for our core courses, which are required courses. From what I understand, those are in the process of being made ADA compliant, but will be up on the website soon. We also have 3 summer school courses, American History, Civics, and our new SRP, Sophomore Research Paper Summer School course. That course was designed last year to help students get through the sophomore research paper process who hadn't completed it during the American History class during the school year. So those three curriculum guides were updated. And then we have several courses where we took a look at the content and reorganized the content or made some changes. A couple of examples of content updates would be in civics, for instance, we added a section on local government that, we had many teachers who would teach that as part of the civics curriculum, but because it was not in the curriculum guide, it wasn't required, but we decided it would be a good idea to, for all kids to be introduced to that. So we included that in our curriculum guide. Global studies, to give you another example of what would be a content update. One of our case studies from second semester, which focused on the Congo, we decided to replace that case study and focus on Kenya. Congo is still addressed in the development unit in first semester, but we don't have a separate case study unit on the Congo. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. The bulk of the work now is really to complete the rest of the outward facing documents. We have 15 other courses that we need to do that for. So we will be doing that during the school year to get those up on the website. We also have a few other courses that we want to review the curriculum guides and again, update essential questions and enduring understandings, specifically sociology, ethics, Civil War and Reconstruction, ancient civilization, and our AP courses. Also, we have a new course to prepare for next year. I think there's going to be another meeting where I'm going to present that course, the new Black and Latino Studies course that it is now going to be a required elective per the state, and that's going to be an elective starting next year. So there is a 300-page curriculum guide that CERC has provided. We're going to dive into that curriculum guide, and at some point this year, you'll hear more about that course. Thank you.
All right, any questions? Mr. Scher.
Lucy, I was just trying to understand. It sounds like you've been updating these curriculum. Is that, or is it you're just updating the materials? I got a little confused by some of the things you were saying there.
So when I use the word update,
Yeah, that's the part.
in many instances, it means revise, tweak based upon teacher feedback. Over the years, when you haven't looked at a curriculum guide for a long time, when the teachers have delivered it, some questions aren't working anymore. Some enduring understandings are out of date. So they take a look at it and improve upon those.
What would be an example of an enduring understanding that's out of date?
I'd have to go back to the documents. I can get you that information.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I was just wondering if you could think of one off the top of your head so I understand that.
I would, off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
I wouldn't
If
want to
you could-
misspeak.
If you could-
So I
that's all
can
right.
certainly
Yeah.
get you that information.
If you could follow up with us on that, or follow up through whoever.
Sure.
I would love to, get those and so I kind of understand that. I pay a lot more, no offense to you guys. I pay a lot more attention to English and math and science. I should probably pay more attention to what you're doing. It's really important work. And my kids are educated by it. So funny how that works. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Other questions for Mr. Orecko? Nope. All right, let's move on. Mr. DeLuca to talk about science.
Good evening, everybody. I'm John DeLuca. I'm the science administrator at the high school. So this summer, what did we work on? As you probably recall, we did significant curricular work a couple of years ago in science. Really made some major shifts in our offerings to align much more with NGSS. As demonstrated by our scores, the past two NGSS tests, the only two, the first two, we aligned pretty well. And we're pretty happy with what we've done with our courses. So the work we did this summer was, I would kind of categorize it a little bit more on the minor scale in terms of comparing to that, where we were doing some really major curricular heavy lifting. The first thing we worked on was we developed an honors human biology curriculum. This is going to be an additional honors level elective for upperclassmen. The history behind this class, I teach AP biology often, and in hearing a lot of the feedback that we get from our students as well as our guidance counselors, the shifts that were made in AP biology were shifts that really moved towards a molecular focus and away from a human anatomy focus. And so we had students who were really craving that honors level, in-depth look at human anatomy. And we saw it as a gap in our offerings. And so we developed this curriculum over the summer as a one semester class, and I'll be back proposing this class to you guys this fall, hopefully, to really kind of meet the needs there that we identified in that gap analysis. The other work that we did over the summer involved really updating in a course called Environmental Experiences. Environmental Experiences hadn't been run in a couple of years, and we wanted to address that because we really thought this was a course that provided students really strong background in earth and space science. We have an honors level version of this course. We have an AP level version of environmental sciences. Here we had an on-level version that students really weren't taking, and we wanted to try to correct that. So we put some effort into really kind of revamping it, making sure it was absolutely aligned with NGSS. We started that work last year. We finalized it over the summer. We are running it this year. We're very excited about that class. And then finally, Honors Biochemistry. Honors Biochemistry was a course that we wrote years ago to align with the CAPT standards. Now we've moved away from that, and we're, of course, aligned with NGSS. But there were really, really wonderful elements of this class that we loved, and we wanted to bring it back to students. And so we took a look at the content that was in that course. We kept some of the material that we thought would be excellent in terms of keeping for the students. We took out some of the material that had been more CAPT heavy. And we think this will be a really good class to take as a semester class along with that honors level human anatomy class. And so they won't be coupled together, but students will have the opportunity to take both of them or just one of them. And then finally, like you've heard some of the other folks from the high school talking about, we did create our public facing curricular documents for our core classes, biology, chemistry, physics. And we really, what we'd like to do is just continue that work throughout the course of this year. So if you could skip to the next page here. So I think I've probably stated some of these things. So a list of what we worked on over the summer to the left. Our focus this year, well, we're going to propose that honors human biology course first to the GHS faculty and then bring it to you all. We want to continue the work, like I just stated, of creating that outward facing curricular documents for the classes outside of those core classes. It's really just taking the curriculum that we have for those and making those public facing documents. We want to take a look at the effectiveness of the curricular changes we made to the environmental experiences. We want to advertise about our two new, not new, but our semesterized courses, the honors human and the biochemistry, the honors biochemistry. And then finally, based on some teacher feedback, I'd like to refresh some of our practical level courses as well. So that kind of sums up our summer work. Happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Mr. Chair. John, is if you go look at STEM students in colleges and universities, right? They're all now required to take in their core early years. Essentially what's data science, it's analytics, and it's it's what you were talking about earlier. Also computer programming. Okay, so that's kind of emerged. And I'm wondering the degree to which you guys at the high school would recommend kind of an increase in that, and also a making that more standard, particularly for STEM students, because increasingly I think you're seeing also, I was looking at data, I don't know whether it's valid or not, that increasingly kids are going to college because of its incredible expense, right? More and more, hey, I gotta go take something that's STEM related, right? A lot more engineering, a lot more computer science, a lot more core sciences, because they need that when they kind of get out, as opposed to, humanities has kind of got its own challenges. I was humanities, so it's for the dumber people like me, I guess. So I'm there for us guys. But I'm wondering if you guys have thought more about that as you looked at the curriculum and how that gets connected into more, making that more available to kids.
I mean,
particularly in support of the sciences, because there's one thing to just go do computer science.
Yeah.
It's a different thing to deal with it in terms of data sets and programming specifically for things like doing a biochem analysis, doing, by the way, what you're doing with these courses and their honors, not just relying on the AP, kudos to you guys. That's great. That different levels for different kids. That's fantastic. But I'm wondering if you guys had thought about that yet. Maybe it's the next evolution.
Yeah.
Turn of the crank.
So I guess I'd answer that in two ways. So I think that what you're, that deeper level of data analysis and statistical analysis, I think is already started to really get embedded in our courses because of how NGSS pushed us. So if you take a look at those practices that Tara was talking about before, there's data analysis all over that. And so you're walking, like I'll walk into a marine biology class and those students are analyzing data like I've never seen before. And they've really kind of taken to that. So I would say that we're seeing it embedded already in the classes. If you're asking about actual courses that would be developed, which I think is where you were.
I mean, like I knew about how to dealing with data.
Yeah.
Then I go to business school and I have to take a stats class.
Yeah.
Right. Then, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that kind of opens up your eyeballs. Right. Or like, I learned how to code and then I actually take, because I do it in my work, I do coding class. Like, whoa, okay, this is a whole, now I have a better understanding what my developers do.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. I think you guys have done a fantastic job. of advancing that thing. And we've spent so much time and money on NGSS, and you guys, I know you're new here now, but it's fantastic job, everything that's happened. Particularly, Sheila was a big proponent of that. There was outside help. That's great. I'm just, I was thinking about doing things. Do we need to get to a place where we do it discreetly? Because I know, for example, if I'm not wrong, the highest performing kids, by the time they get to 12th grade, maybe they take stats. But then is there kind of something that's for
From
more,
a science perspective.
yeah, or more kids who want to be STEM, and maybe they're not going to go to, a university with 11 APs, because we got a lot of kids like that. But maybe there's some other kids.
Yeah.
So kind of opening the aperture. So maybe there's a kid who didn't do APs and they did lots of honors.
Right.
Or maybe even they just took regular grade level. And, how do you think about expanding that? It's just a question and an idea for the future.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and it's something absolutely we can consider. We're always open to taking a look at new courses, new ways of rethinking it. So for sure. Yep.
All right, let's close it out, I think, and move on to the next.
Happy to introduce Christina Shaw.
Thank you, John. Good evening. I'm Christina Shaw. I am the World Language Administrator, and as Adrian Klein has already said, the two of us work closely together to make sure that our World Language program is fully aligned from K through 12. So I'm also in charge of Innovation Lab at the high school and Cantor House Administrator. So over the summer, we had our teachers begin by taking what we call a curriculum inventory of our courses in all 7 languages. And this entailed teachers examining what we had in our existing curriculum maps on Aspen and thinking about whether or not the way we had laid out, the way the curriculum was put originally, was working in the classroom now. And then with this information, we had groups of teachers work over the summer, revising some curricula, including areas in American Sign Language, which has exploded recently. And in some of our other classes, especially the native Spanish, where teachers felt that some of the materials that were being used currently might need to be updated to further engage our students. In addition, we had teachers begin working on our public-facing document in all of the languages, and that is work that we are continuing now and about ready to finish for all of our languages. As far as what we are working on for this year coming up, we are very proud to be rolling out a virtual language lab for our students. This came out of the need due to the pandemic. But we are then being able to offer the language lab to more students by having it virtual. Teachers would not need, for example, to move into a particular classroom to use the applications associated with the language lab, but could have that right there on the students' devices. So currently, our teachers are engaging in professional development to be able to understand how to use this virtual lab. Some of the other work that we will do this year includes fine-tuning some of the other inward-facing documents that we have for our different languages. And also we're exploring the possibility of using the Apple test, which is already used at the elementary level and at the middle school level. And if you're not familiar with that, it stands for Actual Assessment of Performance Toward Proficiency in Languages. And some of that information we thought could be used at the high school level, since in addition to use it for assessment purposes, students who score well on the Apple test could then be granted a seal of biliteracy that would eventually appear on their diploma. Other districts are doing it in Connecticut, and we would like to push for that for our students as well, to offer them more opportunities, especially students who already are dual language learners or come to us already having spoken more than one language. My hope is that in the near future, we could not only have the students at the high school take that test, but even find a way to include this and link it so that we could, just like other disciplines, see the progress of our students from K through 12. One other thing that we're going to be working on at the high school is having some of our teachers explore the early college experience with UConn that is already started in other disciplines. Again, with the idea that we want to offer our students more opportunities in addition to the advanced placement. We have a very robust language program, and so we would want to increase the opportunities for our students. Any questions?
Dr. Francis.
Can you just give an example for that, the UConn, was that like, would you be like a literature course, or would it be a course in a given subject? Like what kinds of things might be included in?
Well, the way that works for world language is that our teachers would need to be certified by UConn in the particular language. And then it would be for the advanced language classes. So if you are the German teacher, our German teacher is looking into it now and taking coursework with UConn so that she might be certified. And then her students that take AP German would then basically earn college credit with UConn that would go on their transcript in college. So it's a wonderful opportunity for students. Our hope is to expand that also beyond AP so that we have advanced Spanish classes that are electives where students taking that class who maybe opt not to take the AP could use that as well as credit for college.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Dr. Carabello, are you going to wrap up?
So I'd like to thank this brand new K-12 curriculum team for collaborating together and for presenting together tonight. We hope that you learned a lot of things about each of the individual curriculums, and we know that you will have a lot more to learn as we progress forward this year. We're really very excited on the collaboration that we're getting for K-12, even though we're pre-K, post-12, we'll be working on that too. So I'd like to say thank you to our team here, and I have told them that they can leave because
Yes,
they are
thank
done.
you, everybody, very, very much. I have to say, you know, the summer work used to happen. We never used to get an update, and what we would get was grumbling from teachers. We understand people were doing this, but we didn't get anything out of it. It sounds like a lot of forward progress. So thank you all very much. Look forward to hearing this maybe in bite-sized pieces in future updates. So thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our special education action planning update. Dr. Healy
Thank you so much.
Ginthaler. I'm getting closer, I think. Stacey, how did I do with your name?
Yes. There should be a PowerPoint.
Yeah, Michael, can you bring up the slides, please? Thank you, sir.
I kind of like it up there than last time when it was over to the side. I can follow along. So good evening, board members, chairman, Dr. Jones, and also to the community members and families who are watching from home. This is an update on the action planning. I think we need to go back 2 slides, actually. There you go. So just a review of our action planning. I was here a couple weeks ago and talked about how we were getting our start, and we've been able to make a lot of progress. So I wanted to provide an update on that. If we could go to the next slide. I don't know that I like this mic holding the microphone as much as when it's sitting up there. So this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about the new name and logo for the department, which is really exciting. Some notable accomplishments, specifically some that are benefiting students now. So I think it's really important as we look at our work, how it's impacting students and making sure that they are receiving the benefit of all the work that we're doing. And then updating the action planning on the partnership between Greenwich and PCG. Next slide. So after extensive Googling and doing all sorts of research on alternative names from the Pupil Personnel Service Department, really trying to, as we discussed last time, what is the mission and values that we're trying to convey? We have decided on the Office of Special Education and Student Supports. And the first part, really just saying special education, because that is what our office is. And when parents go to a website and they're trying to find information, they want to go to, I'm looking for special education. And so we wanted to put that out there so that parents can find that. Also, part of our department, we also cover nursing services, school counselors, 504. So we also provide student supports, and we really are focused on students. So we wanted to add that to our name as well. So I think it really is a good representation of what it is that, our office stands for. And then we also have developed a little logo. So if you look at the left side, just to kind of represent, our office, and so that, on our letterhead and our website and all the community outreach we have, that this means Greenwich, and this means that the Office of Special Education and Student Supports, and really as a representation of the partnership between parents, staff, and students. Next slide. So this first slide is looking at some of the changes that have already occurred that are directly impacting our students. So first, the classes at the middle and high school have reflected like a genuine education, genuine general education setting, and that we relooked at class distribution so that we were reaching that 50-50, so that it wasn't primarily students with disabilities in a class. And when in the instances where we couldn't do a 50-50, so for example, some of the high school classes, depending on what the course was, we made sure that the class size was lower so that students really are getting that general education experience and that intensive instruction that they need. We also worked really hard this summer on the initial evaluations and PPTs. So starting with about 123 initial evaluations, the department completed 90 evaluations this summer, which is a huge amount. The goal being that students who need to qualify for special education services had PPTs and IEPs in place by the first day of school, so that if they really needed services, that they were in place. Now, there's always going to be a few students that were, unavailable. There was traveling, or we had requests to wait till the school year started. But I think 90 evaluations is quite a few to get done during the summer. So I'm really proud of the team that we had and the work that they put in. We also have some co-teaching in math and English at Greenwich High School. So we've been able to do 4 classes in math and 4 classes in English. And so with that, we're able to now start to provide an alternate educational experience for students to work on their IEP goals outside of academic lab. And so we have teachers who are our special ed teachers with our general education teachers. And we have a coach working with them on best practices in co-teaching and implementing that in the classroom. We've also asked all of our case managers to reach out to families at the beginning of the school year for a personal phone call and to just touch base with the parents to say, I am so excited to have your child in my classroom. What do I need to know? This has already been my experience with your child, and I want to share that with you. So we're starting off in developing that positive relationship between families and the teachers. We also have redistributed our coordinators' assignments out of central office to allow for them to be out at schools more. So we were able to redistribute the number of schools that each had, so that the expectation is that they can be at the schools to be able to help the schools problem solve and support the students in the classroom. And then I've had many meetings with parents who have their child in an added district placement, both individual meetings that parents have reached out, as well as meetings through settlements or resolution sessions in which we've talked about why they've requested to have their child in an added district setting. And then that information, so I've been collecting that so that as we start doing our budget planning and we start looking at what kind of programs we need for next year, I have the information and the data from the parents and from our out of district placements to be able to make those recommendations. Next slide. So here's some additional milestones that we have that we're kind of looking at more procedural. We held our first MTSS stakeholder meeting yesterday, and that included administrators, teachers from kindergarten through the high school, as well as a parent representative and a member from UConn, Dr. Gabriel, who had started some of the MTSS work. And so we started in laying out our mission of developing an MTSS manual and creating processes and procedures of what MTSS additional support and interventions would look like in the school. I've also met with Ms. O'Regan, who was here earlier, about our ALP students and looking at how do we identify our 2E students. And when we talked about that, we really looked at it from both sides. If I have a student who is being evaluated for special education, what kind of learning profile or assessment profile am I looking at that might indicate a student who might qualify for ALP? On the other hand, we've talked about how we can support our ALP teachers and identifying students who might be in ALP who have a disability. And what would that process look like? So we want to make sure, so our outcome is to develop a 2E manual. And that really lays out some of that process that we can do. And so we're looking at it from both sides so that we can make sure that we're encompassing all children. We've also, feel like I've done a lot of groups that we convened the stakeholders to develop the special education procedures and practices manual. And that is in process and is close to completion. I'm so excited about that. We were able to convene 5 different groups, each consisting of a special education administrator, a building administrator, a special education staff, a parent member, and the groups were facilitated by Stephen Profit from CERC and Jay Brown from the State Department of Education. And with that, they went over different chapters within the manual to look at from the state template to say, does anything need to change to reflect Greenwich? So how do we take a state template and then make it Greenwich? And what kind of practices or procedures might we do that's above and beyond what the state requires? And so those groups have been held and they provided feedback on the manual. And now we're in the process of typing that back up. And so we would have that completed as the draft, and then that will go back out to the committee to review to see, make sure we captured everybody's thoughts. And then we'll be able to move forward with that. We've also, I think I mentioned this last time, revised the transportation process, and that we have also going back and talking about initial evaluations, provided some explicit guidance for the school teams and how to complete any initial evaluations. We've updated the process a little bit to make it more streamlined and to actually be able to speed it up in sense of getting information from the schools to the evaluation teams. Previously, it went from like one person and then somebody would tell somebody. And so now we're doing some more direct lines of communication. So with that, we documented out exactly what that looks like. So to help the teams and so that everybody is following the same process. Next slide. Some additional technical milestones that we've met is we've had the Universal Design for Learning training for the administrators. We have conducted an assistive technology contract review. And with that, we wrote up a job description, and I'm happy to say that we hired a 0.5 assistive technology specialist last week. So I'm very excited to have her joining us, and that'll be able to provide some additional training to our staff, and so they can access, help our students access some of that assistive technology, which then goes to help and support accessing that higher level education. And then we've also, all of our teachers, our special ed teachers participated in the Big Ideas math training. And so that it was such a good thing that everybody is getting that training together. So as we talk about inclusive practices, all of our teachers are together and they understand that, so they can support each other and support the students in the classroom. And so these are all the first steps in training. What we have been able to do is have a very detailed plan of professional development for this year. And then that is part of a larger 3-year professional development plan that we're in the process of doing, so that we can see how the training this year feeds into next year, into the following year, because we don't want to lose the training that we have, but we also want to build on it. And we're looking at how much we can do through a coaching model, as opposed to everybody come into an auditorium and listen to a speaker. We want to look at how can we make sure that these practices are happening in the classroom, and then if they aren't, how can we help staff do them in the classroom? Because if we're, often they just don't know how, and having somebody come in and support them, having that extra support and just another set of eyes is often very, very helpful. Next slide. So for the action planning, so far, so when I wrote this up last week, we had completed 20 of the 28 action planning templates. As of today, I'm happy to say we're at 23 of the 28. So we have 5 more to go. So we really are anticipating completing all of that planning by the end of the month. That's taking all of the 28 recommendations and having an objective, having a target, and having the steps of how we're meeting those. So I'm really happy with the progress that we've been able to do. We've been meeting weekly, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week in order to get that done, but we're getting there. Next slide. Here's another example of the action planning template that we've been doing. At the last meeting, we shared the MTSS and the transportation, which were a little bit more technical in terms of the objective that we were trying to share. I wanted to share this one just as a reminder of what we were working on, but also to show what it looks like for some that are more of changing a mindset. So this is looking at academic optimism and growth mindset. And as you can see, it really is a collaboration between the special education department, the schools, and looking at how we can support teachers and really looking at that partnership piece. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that up there. It's not all professional development and, making manuals. It's also about changing the mindset that we have with our staff and in the things that we do and how we work with children. Next slide. So this is kind of the project milestones and how it's broken up into reporting. You can see that tonight's board presentation is on there, as well as we've been working on a consolidation plan. That's a kind of an internal document. At the last meeting, we talked a little bit, and the questions were about priorities and how to prioritize all of the recommendations. As we really started working on the action planning, we saw that many of them kind of went together, not just within the topic area, like there's 3 different goals that we have around parent input, but even greater amongst the different topic areas. And that those together really help kind of plan where some of the priorities are, because you could see how one impacted the other and set the foundation of what we needed to build on. And so we are in the process of finishing that up. And then we'll have a more formal report in November, which would be the first performance and accountability report. And that will be able to give some of the more specific details of what we've been working on. And I believe that is it.
All right, discussion, Ms. Hirsch.
Just to begin with, I wanted to say a huge thank you for all the incredible work that's taken place thus far. I'm thrilled to see some of the upcoming milestones, which you just went over at the end of the update, and the timeline for that year. I hope this helps many members of the community see that will be regular progress updates and check-ins and how transparent we're going to be with some of these changes moving forward. And I look forward to hearing more about some of the work that's been done thus far and so forth. I did have a quick question. One of the things you mentioned, I think, answered one of my questions already, but when you were gathering input on the reasons for out-of-district placements being requested, will we get a little bit more information on that, or is that coming when we get towards budget season?
That's coming when we get to budget season. So looking at what is the rationale for the placement and how that would impact the planning that we need to do within for next budget year for programming within the district.
I can't wait for that. Something we've been asking for years. So thank you for doing that. And I also was hoping to see, I know that you were working with Ms. O'Regan for discussions on ALP identification processes for 2E. I have twice exceptional students. So this one's near and dear to my heart. I've been asking for something like this since long before I was on the board. So I was wondering when we might get sort of an update on that. Well, do you think that will be coming with the ALP review that we're going to be getting? I think it's in October. Or what's your next report in November?
The plan is to have it as part of the next report in November. It's also as part of the steps within the action steps. Ms. O'Regan and I are meeting, and we're looking at developing that 2E manual. And so that will also be including stakeholders in that. And so that as we get more information on that and move forward, that's more where we'll be able to share some additional information.
And I guess the final, well, I have a bunch, but the final question I'll ask at the moment was just, again, the technical milestones that you've met so far really have been fantastic. The professional development, the coordination and collaboration for general education staff as well is fantastic. And I just didn't know at the next update if we'll be getting a little bit more information about some of the additional professional development that'll be coming, as I assume it's going to be a continued year-long process and multi-steps for some of the training for MTSS and UDL as well.
Absolutely. So we've developed a training program for this school year, and then that'll be part of a 3-year as well. So obviously this year's more specific in that we have dates such as our full PD days, the early release days, the Wednesdays, and how we're training staff on that. So we have that training for this year. And then, like I said, that's then part of a 3-year. That's more, if we're doing this, what does that then look like next year? So how are we rolling over into that? So that's something in November we can provide as part of the update to actually have the document of the PD planning.
I know you can't see it behind my mask, but I'm smiling because this is what we've been asking for so long. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Other discussion, Ms. Kolsky?
I just have a couple of follow-up questions. The stakeholder meeting that you had and included parents, how were those parents selected and how many groups did you form?
So we had 5 groups. The parents I spoke with both the PTAC committee as well as the SEAC committee and asked them to send out to their members that we were looking for participants. I had several parents, more than several, reach out to me over my time since I've started. And so I sent emails to them as well. And then I also asked the coordinators for recommendations of parents that they had worked with that they thought might be interested in being part of the committee. And so from all of those, we had takers from each of those groups.
And how long do you anticipate the committees to stay formed?
So the commitment was to review the procedures manual prior to the meeting. It was a 3-hour time commitment. That was a Zoom meeting that was facilitated by the State Department as well as CERC. And then they'll do one more read through of the manual.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I understand. And then you had also, when, with respect to the manual, when is that anticipated being released?
Hopefully, right now I'm on track to be above where we had targeted. We had thought that maybe like November, but where we are right now, barring anybody having new information or input that they want to add into the manual, probably the end of September, and anticipating to start training our staff at the October early release Wednesdays going forward from that.
So when will the board get an opportunity to look at it and provide comment?
I guess, Karen, that's not something historically the board would either review or comment on. We certainly don't vote on that.
But I would think we would get an opportunity to review it before it gets implemented, given all of the work we've already done with respect to the work last year to have a pre-read.
Certainly, we can have a discussion, with the superintendent about that, but it's not anything the board's voting on. It's not a policy. So it is a document of the administration, but certainly we may be able to get a look at it. And if you had comments, you could share them, but it's up to them as to whether they take them. But I'll have that discussion with the superintendent offline.
Okay, well, I mean, we're taking parent comments, so I figured we'd take board comments as well. My last question is with respect to the action plan templates that you referenced. Will you be forwarding those around to see how you've grouped? I know you were talking about consolidations, how you're grouping them, what those templates look like, and the specific timelines associated with the action items.
Yes, so at the last presentation, we showed a little sample of what that looks like. So we're in the process of transitioning everything that we're doing into the document that will be put out to the public. And that consolidation will be part of that. Part of the discussion even today was how do we make sure to show that so that it's understandable and it's understandable that here's all the different objectives we're trying to hit, but yet they're combined at the same way. And so we've been looking at different ways to present that, but that'll be part of the public document that will be put on the website and then updated as we reach those milestones.
All right, other discussion? Thank you very much. You're making amazing progress already, and we'll be looking forward to the next update.
Thank you.
All right, with that, the next discussion item is the fiscal year 2023 budget resolution. We've already kicked off budget season months ago, so why not keep the work going? Mr. O'Keefe.
Hello, everybody. So this one is an annual pre-budget review of grants that the Board of Ed is authorized to receive, grants and donations. Last year at this time, there were no changes. This year, we are proposing to add an item. It's on the top of the second page, section G. We're proposing to request to have the board authorized to receive donations from qualified 501c3 organizations to help enhance the new Cardinal Stadium and associated building space. So if the board agrees to proceed, this would then have to go to the BET and the RTM for approval. Other than that, everything's the same as prior years.
Thanks, Sean. Mr. Scher.
Hi, Sean. Peter Scher here.
Hi, Peter.
Why did you think you needed to add this? What's the gap?
A couple of board members had asked me if there was a way, since we're, the taxpayers are investing a lot of money into a new stadium and associated buildings. The thinking is that we would want to continue to maintain and enhance the stadium and to see if we could there was a way to get donations that could help contribute to that.
Peter, I think if just to help, basically it would mean that we would not, if we got a donation towards the stadium, we wouldn't have to go through the RTM approval process for a gift.
Sean, we already did this a couple years ago. It's item number 44 for this express purpose. So I was a little puzzled about why I mean, that was the whole purpose of 44. The whole purpose of 44 is popularly known as the GAF clause. And its specific purpose was to make it so that donations for athletic facilities, including Cardinal Stadium, but not limited to Cardinal Stadium, we can automatically take them and apply them to accounts without going to anybody else. So I was just curious why we needed this.
Well, as I was reviewing, this is item 41, previously 43, by the way. I think two of the resolutions were removed by the BET and the RTM, but this is 41, currently 41, previously 43, and it did discuss, authorization to receive donations relative to the PAC. And
Yeah, but I mean, if you read 44, let's just read 44, right? Board of Education is authorized to accept appropriate gifts of athletic equipment and improvements to indoor and outdoor athletic facilities, which would include Cardinal Stadium and any buildings, right? Provided that the gifts or improvements, the athletics comply with town and board policies and procedures. That's no problem because we're not going to take one otherwise, right? Is overseen by you, right? Which was important, meets regulations, and that they shall be applied to the appropriate accounts. So maybe it's just there wasn't an understanding that this clause was already created. I don't think, maybe it just wasn't obvious that.
I think you could be right, Peter.
Yeah, so the other thing I never liked about G, which G doesn't have, G has, and 44 doesn't have. I don't know if you noticed this. I mean, we noticed this at the time that we did this. We just ignored G. If you have the qualifier, a qualified 501c3, that blocks all corporate matching. So, you and I worked at IBM for a long time. And one of the nice things is, I think I did this on multiple occasions. I think it was air conditioners at Eastern Middle School. My wife and I donated a couple $1,000 for air conditioners, and my company matched it.
Yep.
But if it had a 501c3 restriction, they can't take matching gifts from corporations in some cases. So I just want to point that out because in Cardinal Stadium and these athletic facilities, we tried to stay away from G because G is kind of a standard and it's got some restrictions in it. I don't know. You just might want to look at these two things and because as I say, 44 is, as I say, I always thought it was popularly known as the GAF clause. And we were able to work with the BET, and the BET was supportive of this clause. They tend to try and roll over stuff. When it came to the RTM, I can remember standing on the floor and having to explain this to the RTM. They, of course, wanted oversight. And this thing was written really to give them comfort that we weren't going to take any gifts that didn't line up to what the board wanted to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't wind up with the PAC where, like in the case of the PAC, I think people showed up with gifts that the BOE didn't necessarily want, but we took them anyway.
Yep.
And because of generosity of people and them wanting to participate. So anyway, you might fly over this target again. The other beauty is 44, the language has already been cleared by legal.
Yep. Okay.
To the degree you don't have to go to them, all the better. But thank you for the clarification about what it was about.
Yep. Okay. No, I think I think 44 would I think cover it. And I do agree. I've done the same thing about the matching. Really help you could double a gift.
All right, other discussion on this item?
When does this come to us?
This will come to us at our September board meeting because this goes in ahead of the budget so that the BET can work with town legal and get it all cleared out. So we do this and get it off our plate ahead of time. All right, I guess we'll get a revised version from you, Mr. O'Keefe, for our next meeting. Thank you. The next item is the fiscal year 2023 tuition and fees. So Mr. O'Keefe, still you.
Okay, so quickly through, there's 4 pages in that package. The first 2 is just a 3-year summary of the actuals, shows the number of students participating. First page is the K through 12 tuition, shows the number of students, both Board of Ed staff and town employees, what the tuition rates are, what the tuition base is for both the applicable to the Board of Ed staff as well as the town employees. And then in total on the bottom of the page is, what we've collected in revenues over the last 3 years. The projected number for 21-22 is 573,000. As you can see, it's a fairly significant uptick from the actuals for 2021. The next page is similar chart for preschool. Again, it gives you the number of students, the tuition percent by type of student, and the rates, and then what we've collected and will collect in 21-22. So again, fairly significant uptick projected in 21-22. The next 2 pages are what we're proposing for tuition, and similar to the last few years, we are proposing to increase the tuition across the board by 3%. So for both K through 12 and for preschool. Questions?
Sean, I have a question. This is Peter Bernstein about the revenues. I think for I know they go back to the town general fund. Is it the same for the non-resident tuition program as well?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess when we see the budget from you, you'll have that chart that reflects all of the revenues we give back to the town annually, and it'll be the 573 plus the, I guess.
506.
506. All right, great. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
All right, other discussion on tuition and fees, Mr. Scher.
Sean, do you have any idea? And I don't mean to play stump the professor. So it's, do you have any idea of this 58,000 in 21-22? That's projected or actual summer school revenue?
For 21-22. Oh, is this on the
So
third
that
page?
this past summer was 21-22. It's not appended to the prior year. I'm just losing track of the calendar here. Is summer school the start of the 21-22 year, or is it the year prior?
Yes, 21-22.
Okay, so this is what you took in this year, right?
Believe so,
58,084. I'll take it as it is. Do you have any idea how much of that is is high school versus K-8?
I'd have to look into it for you.
Okay, because if we're down to, here's the thing that I just think it's totally counterproductive. If we're taking in 60 grand, right? But it probably costs us that to process it, to take it in. But the thing that doesn't make any sense to me is I'm looking at all these programs that are at the high school, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of things here we would want to do, and we would want kids to take, but the fees are, onerous, right? Like a PSAT SAT prep class. We want kids to take that. we don't want kids to have to go to spend $900 with Kaplan for those, I mean, those of us who can afford it, that's great, but there are a lot of kids who might not be able to do that. So here we are charging $438. And they may not be free or reduced lunch, but $438 may be a lot to them, even if they aren't. Chemistry, I understand the argument was supplies. I can't imagine per student supplies cost $1,000. Biology, 808. I'm wondering, since the revenue is completely de minimis, why we wouldn't just take the fees down to pick it, $118, particularly all the engineering ones. I mean, this fee schedule never made any sense to me. I would think we want more kids participating in this, particularly in the time of learning loss. I mean, we just saw the SBAC results and wowee. So could you figure out how much of this is at the high school? Because I'd like to really propose that we go to a much lower free schedule and see if we can educate more children. I know kids don't like to go in the summer, but it may be worth trying it for a year to see what happens and see if we get increased enrollment and more kids participating so they are better prepared during the regular school year. Could you find that out maybe?
Sure, absolutely.
And if you could just let me know beforehand, because I would hate to have it come up the night we're voting on it, because the board tends not to take in new information like that. So it's something we need to see beforehand.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion on tuition and fees? Seeing none, we will move on then. Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. To the enrollment update. So Dr. Carabillo is going to answer the $1 million question. Where'd these students go?
So I'm assuming that you are talking about our 10th grade students, where we have the drop of about 30 students, is my understanding. I know that Jen Lau spoke with both Tony and myself, Dr. Jones and myself, and said that out of the past 10 years, that we had 3 years where there was a lower enrollment with our 10th grade students. They didn't transfer into the school, or they left the school as 9th graders. The past 7 years out of 10, we have had an increase in grade 10. So I'm not sure where they went. I don't know what students did not return, but perhaps we can have Mr. Mayo and the counselor check that out, and Dr. Jones has something to say too.
Jin Lau was working on this for us, just for us to understand it. And over the last couple of years, our students who are going into that sophomore year, generally, we would lose 60 students. Sorry, we would lose 40, and we would have 60 enroll. So we would have 60 new students enroll that replaced them. This year, that simply didn't happen. We didn't have the 60. It was down by about 20 students. And when she does her lengthy enrollment report, she'll have more information for you after the October 1 official count.
And we want to make sure that you realize that this is just a snapshot of the number of students that were enrolled and came to school on day 1 of our 21-22 school year.
Dr. Francis.
I'm sure we do.
Is there some sense of how many students tend to come in the first couple months or the first?
Well,
I mean, in
Mr. Mayo
addition to
just said
this?
100 new students have registered since September 1st at the high school.
Well, there's a difference between May and September. So since May, so
Oh,
those
since
are
May.
right. So the question is this a number that's likely to go up, and is it typically minimal, or is it something that there's usually a reasonable number that it increases?
We can look into that and find out. I don't have the answer tonight.
I'm sorry, you're saying since May, but I'm just asking from the time that you counted this, so whatever that was, first day of school,
October
September 1st to a month or so from now, is that?
Oh, there is a difference from the first day of school to the official state collection, which is October 1st. So you'll see the difference when we present the report in October.
Ms. Downey.
Okay. And when we're looking at that data, can we also look at the drop from, if there is one, from 10th to 11th? Because that just seems like an odd time to go down in number of students, because once students are at the high school, we would think they'd be continuing on. One question I had was, do we have any sense of the numbers about students homeschooling, or I know we're not really having remote school, but health issues, like, where are they captured in these numbers?
The homeschool students aren't in these numbers because once they have signed their homeschool forms, they're no longer enrolled with Greenwich Public
Right,
Schools.
but I think that would actually be back to the data. That would be helpful data if we see that there's a number of people who've
Yeah.
chosen for health reasons or otherwise that are home, maybe a disproportionate number or a number, consistent with past years. I don't know what the answer is.
I thought that I would see that, last year, I believe we were right around 40.
We had 40 last year.
But as of yesterday, day before, we were only at 15. And they were pooling that. However, we've had some parents, because we're not offering the remote school, who may not have notified us. They don't have to by law fill out the form in Connecticut. We ask them to, because if they just don't show up by the end of week 3, we have to find these children, because you have to make sure we have a responsibility, a legal responsibility. So at the end of week 3, we'll start going through, and it may just be parents that just said, we're not going to fill out the form.
So is it like potentially people who were in remote school last year that we don't know where they are now? There may be X number of them unaccounted for.
There could be. We have 15 right now that filled out the form.
Right.
I thought it would be higher than that, but as of this week, that's still where it's sitting. But we will be looking at any student that we don't know where they went.
Mhm.
We try to go and figure out what happened to that family.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was part of my question was asking is, I know you were talking about the drop in the high school. I know that those are the grades that a lot of kids will tend to go to boarding schools. So that could have something to do with it. I was more focused on, the enrollment at our elementary levels. And I didn't know if we've ever reached out to find out from families that haven't returned why. I'm assuming we're not going to necessarily get a response from all of them. As Christina mentioned, some of them might have chosen to homeschool due to COVID and not having their students' ability to be vaccinated, or that they prefer them to be home for whatever other reason. I didn't know if we had any other information on families who moved from one school in the district to another, but or out of our district. I assume we might be able to get that data based on requests for school record transfers. Have you ever looked into any of that?
Right. We have to do that every year.
Right.
And that's part of what Jen does. And we start really digging into that after week 3.
Because I was mostly concerned, we see a large drop at some of our Title I elementary and our middle. I just want to make sure that we're, making sure that those students are not, at home not getting education, and just sort of make sure that we know where they are. So that was one of my bigger questions. So thank you.
Mr. Scher.
I know this is a flash. I've been doing this enough to know this is a flash. So, there are going to be changes between now and what we get in the October report. In the October report, I asked this question last year and I didn't get an answer. And now this year, we're going to need the answer. So for the last 2 years, we've had substantial drops not projected. Okay. Last year, the theory was, there's all these kids moving into the district. Well, with all the kids moving in and the kids leaving, we were still in negative. All right. And we kind of like skipped over that. But now we're seeing it. Now, and by the way, it's gone down again this year in the flash. Now we'll see what happens because there are kids who don't register and they show up in the first 2 weeks. So if you've been at this a while, as Dr. Francis has, this is, you can't overreact to these numbers. But we need to know, where did these kids go? Because otherwise we're going to have speculation like, oh, they're homeschooled, or they're here, or they're there. I could speculate they all moved to Florida. That's probably wrong. Right? But that would be a popular thing. We need to know, where did these kids go? I hear people talking about, oh, well, they've gone to the private schools because Chris Winters finally finished building his high school. You know, this is all speculation. We need somebody to do the work, to do the data, to figure out what's going on here. The thing that I'm concerned about here is, I think I can figure out what went on with Hamilton Avenue and New Lebanon. So, Ann, the next time you come, previously they're given reports. John Curtin used to do this, used to give ins and outs. And it was super helpful for kids transferring within district. There'd be two big questions I'd had. We know a bunch of kids left Julian Curtis while it was being built. We know they went to Hamilton Avenue. It looks like a bunch of kids went back, which would be great. I don't know if that's true or not. We need to know that by somebody doing the work. I have heard parents say they're not happy with EMS, so a number of them are using the magnet to go to Western. I have no idea whether that's true or not. That would be another interesting thing to know. What's concerning is we did a full-blown projection in 2018 that we paid great money for. And a lot of things in our plans are based upon that 2018 projection. And we're off that projection for 2022. The projection was we'd have 9,039 students, which for a long time has been flat enrollment. Current numbers, and hopefully they'll go up between now and October, we're now down to 8,471. So we can't, it used to be we were dealing with stability. Now we're dealing with declining. Let's hope it stabilizes right now and never gets any lower. But there are going to be a lot of, I won't be on the board to answer them. That would be great. Someone else will do it. There's going to be a lot of questions asked. So when we get around to October, I'd rather not wait for a budget discussion on this. I think in October, I would encourage the administration to come in with deep analysis of what's going on that's based on fact and we can prove, so that it moves out of speculation and into reality. I wouldn't want to have to defend a budget that is increasing at the rate we're increasing with this kind of declining enrollment. I would recommend to the board and some board members who fortunately don't even have to be elected, they'll be back on the board. You want to get ahead of this problem, not be behind it in the community. But thank you for the flash. I think last year we didn't get one, so it was great to get it. And it's super helpful as we go forward.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Kowalski.
Yeah, I know we got something else last, I think it was at the November meeting that was more in depth, but what would be helpful is I was trying to look at this in connection with the material we got last year around this time, is just comparison in numbers. And I'm wondering if there's a chart that can be put together to show trend over, say, the last 5 years of what was projected versus actual, so we can see those numbers. And is there any class has a peak that's going up versus coming down? Because obviously we're seeing the trends going down, but it would help us to have a year-over-year analysis in connection with it to see if we see any trends. Because if I look back at last year's analysis between that 9th and 10th grade year, we lost, sorry, can't see, 29 students there too. So it is a continual trend that we're seeing. And I'd like to see, well, what did it look like the year before and the year before? I want to get out of this. We got to constantly look at this in connection with COVID stuff, because this is the world we live in now. So what does it look like going forward? And can we gather any other additional data points by basically looking year over year at this rather than a snapshot?
Mr. Kelly.
I guess at one point, for budget reasons, we have to have to take a look at this, not just from internally, but we might have to bring in a group to tell us where this is trending. Because the insight, the information we get amongst ourselves is important, of course, but we have to look at trends that go beyond just Greenwich. So at one point, we might want to look at bringing somebody in to help us out with this projections for budgetary reasons.
Yes, we do utilize an outside person.
Oh, good. Thank you.
All right, so we will get a deeper dive in October. Again, this is just a snapshot of where we are actually on the first day of school. My guess is enrollment is probably up by today already. So those numbers shift. And I mean, I've been in an office in an elementary school and seen a student getting enrolled in, November. So it will continue to change. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our last discussion item, which is the proposed staff vaccination policy. Ms. Downey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bernstein. So the governor's executive order 13D requires vaccinations and requires boards of vaccinations by staff or with a testing option. And it requires boards of education to create policies to deal with that. What was presented to you was a model policy that CABE suggested to us. PGC had a meeting solely devoted to discussing this policy. We tweaked it a little bit with some grammar. I think, we really wanted to get it before the board so we could have a discussion tonight under a 2 reads policy, so we wouldn't have to have an additional board meeting other than our next board meeting in the event we need to pass this by September 27th, assuming all these executive orders stay in place. One of the issues we as a group were unclear about when we did pass it 3-0 as a discussion item for the board. Subsequent to that, we sent some questions to CABE about, there was language at the end about violations and enforcement, which I personally didn't love. And I was hoping that they didn't believe we needed to mandate. And CABE has confirmed that much of that language we can in fact delete. I would take a position that after violations and enforcement, I would leave the first paragraph in place. And I would probably strike the rest of it. But that's a discussion for the board. PGC didn't vote on it or discuss that. I mean, we did discuss it, but we didn't take a vote on that particular provision. But I'm happy to answer any questions. The language in here was taken directly from the executive order with a little bit of grammar correcting in here and there. So I don't know if my other committee members want to speak or if we want to start taking questions. Karen or Kathleen, do you want to say anything or no? Okay, Peter.
All right, Dr. Francis.
I was just going to say, I agree with your proposal to remove that part, and I think otherwise it's fine.
Mr. Chair.
Christina, thanks for doing the work, I suppose, to the committee members. I said this the other day, and I think we can dramatically simplify the task. I don't know why we don't just have a policy that says the Board of Education will follow the executive order 13D, to its I mean, it's a directive from the state. We're required to do it. And now, unfortunately, you're already into wordsmithing, right? If you read 13D, it's exceptionally clear about what the mandate is. It also expires on the 30th unless it's extended. Candidly, I don't want to talk about this again. I'd rather spend time talking about curriculum and curriculum maps and people and things that actually impact students. I mean, this is pretty clear. The governor's already made the call. So I would just encourage you guys in PGC just to candidly to scrap this and just come back with relative to vaccines. The Board of Education instructs the superintendent to implement consistent with Governor's Order 13D. And then whenever they expire it, change it, what have you, then the superintendent knows what to do. I mean, I guess an example, I was thinking about this today. I mean, I'm vaccinated, everybody in my household's vaccinated. Okay. It baffles me why people aren't vaccinated, but people aren't vaccinated for whatever reason. And you have this exception stuff that's written by the state. It also says, and you took the clause out, or Cabe took the clause out, that says that this is in effect till the 30th of September. So.
Well, this one was a little funky and this.
No, no, I
No,
get
no,
it,
Peter, I
get
don't
it.
disagree with you.
I
The
get it.
tricky part of this is that we know the executive order expires September
And
30th.
it may be
But then
extended.
but the way this is done, it tells us that we have to do stuff commencing September 27th.
Correct.
So it is, I don't disagree. That's kind of, we're between a rock and a hard place on this in terms of that.
Well, can
We
we
wanted
just-
to be, no, but we wanted to be prepared for in the event we do need, let's just say the governor extends this executive order
Correct.
on an extended period of time. And we are
Which I think will
required,
happen.
no, we are required to have a policy in place about, with the specifics about staff vaccinations. We wanted to take action so that we as a board would be more nimble to be able to implement this because frankly, our September board meeting is September 23rd, at which point in time we will be better positioned with the facts.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. The language from Cabe, I don't know if you guys probably observed this. It's a direct lift from the executive order. That document, with the exception of one sentence, is the executive order. There's nothing special. So I just wonder, look, this thing's fine. The governor said you have to do it. We have to do it. I'm just wondering why we don't simplify our lives and just say, implement Executive Order 13D. And by the way, it's Tony Jones' job to figure the rest of it out.
Peter, it's Dr. Jones or Tony, or they're the superintendent. You don't need to keep saying Tony Jones. It's just demeaning.
I'm just not sure we have that leeway, that if we're supposed to have a policy in place that addresses a particular topic.
Who says we have to have a policy? The state says you have to implement, right?
Well,
So
I think
ours would be implement 13D, right? That is our policy, right?
All right, Dr. Francis.
I think philosophically, the issue is, do you want to have some clear language that anyone can look at and say, this is what Greenwich Schools is doing? And, there's a lot of policies that are required by the state that we've passed that go into detail to make clear what we're doing to follow the requirements from the state. And I think it's not unreasonable to have that in there. I think philosophically, you could say, try and make it simpler. I think it's nice to have it so if someone looks at our policies, they can find it and they can see it, and they don't have to go searching for something else. So I think you can go either way.
It doesn't sunset on its own.
All right, look, obviously there's a philosophical difference here. Hopefully by the time we get to our next meeting, we will know more. We can have a discussion about what we think is appropriate at that time, but I think it's a little premature. I think the purpose for PGC bringing this forward is so we can have the first read tonight. We're aware of it. We obviously have to wait and see where the state lands, and then we go from there. Is that, Christine, is that accurate?
Beautifully stated.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we're going to move on to our action items. So the first action item is the Cardinal Stadium authorization of the Eversource easement. Mr. Kelly, did you want to make the motion as it appears on the cover sheet? And if you need help with that, I got it in front of me.
Got it. Approve request to RTM to authorize the grant of an easement to Connecticut Power and Light, ABA's Eversource.
DBA, right? I think doing business as, yes, it's small there. I will second that motion. I think Sean, if you want to take it, I know Tom Haganey is and as an attendee. Michael, if you could bring Tom Haganey up as a panelist so he can answer any questions we have. And Sean, if you want to explain where we are.
Yep, I'll just make a quick couple of points, and then if Tom is here, he can answer any detailed questions. The request is for an easement from the town to Eversource to provide upgraded electric service from 200 amp to 800 amp service. The transformer and the power cables that are needed for the upgrade are located on town property, hence the request for the easement. And finally, this is a similar request that was recently requested to the RTM for the police pistol range on Steamboat Road. Tom, you want to chime in or take questions?
It's actually very simple, Sean. Just as the town went through this process on the pistol range on Steamboat Road, Eversource, when you're upgrading to a electrical service that is greater than something that could be placed overhead, requires an easement before they'll install it. The easement has to be signed by the first selectman and approved after being approved by the RTM. So this is the process that needs to be followed. Very straightforward, and it's what Eversource has been doing for a number of years now. Before, it used to be just put the wires in the ground, but now they require this formal easement.
Thank you, Tom. All right, any discussion from board members? All right, so the vote is to request an easement, to ask RTM to authorize the easement so that work could progress. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for joining us, welcoming you back to the Board of Ed for a brief moment in time.
It's been a while, but thanks.
You're welcome. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Michael, you can drop Tom like a hot potato and we will move on to our next item. Thank you, Tom. All right, next up is the GHS entry. So we've got two things to take care of here. Ms. Downey, I'll turn it over to you for motions.
Yes, Mr. Walker was unable to be with us this evening. On behalf of the, well, not on behalf of it, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the design for the GHS entryway, which is designated Scheme 4, Option 1, as recommended by the building committee.
I will go ahead and second that motion. All right, you want to take the discussion on that one?
Yeah, we presented this, the building committee was here. I think we have the architects available, Mike. I don't know if you want to elevate them if anybody has any further questions. Dean and David, I think, were on the line. Am I on? Well, we'll see. Hopefully they
See
were
if anybody
dialing
has
in.
any, let's see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, so anyway, this is, you'll see it in the packet. Same, identical to what it was at our last meeting, what was recommended by the committee.
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
Just for point of clarification, I assume Scheme 4, Option 1. Option 1, are we talking just about the exterior of that? If not, if you're talking about the interior, there was a discussion as to whether we were going to have glass around the security desk or not. So I'm not sure which, we're just
If
doing
that's included in that.
The floor plan, I believe it's just the design, the exterior design, and Mr. Bernstein, you've been on more building committees than I have. I believe where the security desk was, the doors in the entryway to the office and the reconfiguring of the office space, that was what we're voting on. We do not need to vote on the issue of security glass at the security desk. We can give direction to the committee. That's something we can decide upon later. So we're purely voting on the exterior that you're seeing. And then if you scroll down a little bit, you can see the interiors we talked about, where the security guard will be located and the entrance to the office and the office space.
And just as a matter of course, the discussion we had last time is it is not in the ed specs to have glass at the security guard desk.
That is correct.
And one of the things we discussed last time is if it could be designed so the glass could potentially be put in the future, which would be completely allowable without a change in the ed specs. If we wanted to add the glass, we would have to go back and have a discussion about whether we want to do that
And
and
the committee would
specifically
want
vote on
the
that.
committee would
aspect.
want a direction on that, but for the meantime, we do not need to make that decision other than to say we generally want to go with that approach.
All right. So are there any discussion on this? Dr. Francis.
The only thing I would say is I believe last time we sort of all felt that we probably would lean against having the glass included if there's any need for direction.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Stowe.
I'd agree with that sentiment, Gaetan. That's what I sort of took away from our discussion as well.
Yep, same spot for me. All right, hearing no further discussion, so the motion on the table is to approve the design for the Greenwich High School entryway, Scheme 4, Option 1. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We have a design. And then Ms. Downey, we have a second order there.
I'm going to let Mr. O'Keefe handle that.
We need to make a motion first. So do you want to go ahead and make the motion and then we'll let Sean do the discussion?
Okay, let me just get the wording out just to be sure it's accurate.
moving that the RTM authorize the preparation of schematic drawings and outline specification as required by the state of Connecticut.
And I will second that. And then Mr. O'Keefe, if you can explain to us why the state has this wonderful new requirement.
Okay, so there are three things that are necessary to allow a Board of Ed to apply for school construction funding. One is to the legislative body, the RTM, has to authorize the Board of Ed to apply. That's been done back in April, May, when they approved the funding. There was a resolution that authorized that. The second one is to authorize an establishment of a building committee. That's been completed as well. The third item is what is up for discussion tonight, to a legislative body to authorize at least the preparation of schematic drawings and outline specifications. So once we have that approved by the RTM, we can formally apply for school construction funding for the GHS entryway.
All right, and so I think the real purpose of this is to maximize our reimbursement from the state. I think we've already gotten some funding. We are looking for additional funding. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, so the vote is to request the RTM to authorize, I gotta go back and find it on the cover sheet, to grant the easement. Oh, no, that's the other one. Sorry, gotta go back. I got too many items open. To approve the request of the RTM to authorize the preparation of schematic drawings and outline specifications as required by the state of Connecticut. All those in favor, please raise your hands. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. 8-0. All right, so we will move on, and that item is actually on the RTM call already, so that's great. Next up is the GOSA contract approval. So Mr. Kelly, Chair of the Negotiations Committee, if you want to make the motion, and then we'll have the discussion.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to ratify the Greenwich Organization of Schools Administrators contract for 2022 to 2025 and move forward to the RTM.
And Ms. Downey, do you want to second that as a member of the committee?
Happily so.
All right. So Mr. Kelly, why don't you talk us through where we are?
Well, I'll tell you how we got to the concluded negotiations. We put a really powerful team together of representing all of the organizations in town. We met with, we had Dan Ozemir from the RTM. We had the BET chair, Karen. We had Jeff from the BET, Raymer. We had Superintendent Tony Jones was there. We had, let's see, who else do we have there? Tremaine Johnson, our chief of human resources officer. We had Mike Mason, who's sitting in the back there. Mike Mason was part of our organization as well. We had Tom Mooney, the attorney who represented us in this case, who he wrote the book on labor contracts. So he was very, very helpful. Our committee was awesome. We had myself as the chair, 35 years of negotiating experience. We had Mr. Bernstein, our chair, BOE chair, and an attorney as well, and Christina Downey, who also is the attorney. So we had a really powerful team, a great group of people. What we did was everyone had a voice. We didn't just take our committee itself, the three of us. We had numerous meetings. We had first meeting was just the other team with their reps. Then we met with a mediator, and then we started down the road towards the arbitrator. We ended up concluding our negotiations prior to that. So basically, early on, we met with the principals, or I met with the principals, and we laid some groundwork where we wanted to land, and we used everyone's voice. Listened to everybody. No one was not satisfied with our proposal in where we wanted to land. And we determined this when making our decisions. We really like our building administrators. And we wanted to cut them basically a fair deal. And we knew we had the responsibilities of the town. And we took that into consideration with our team. And then as we negotiated and discussed things, we realized that, or the other side as well realized that this is a fair negotiation, trying to make sure that we land someplace that's mutually beneficial. So after a little bit of process, we ended up finding that spot. Our entire team that we just mentioned was satisfied. and they also were satisfied as well. So we have a mutually agreeable contract, and everyone seemed okay with it.
All right, thank you. And maybe I'll add a little bit of the details of the tentative agreement we reached. This is what you would call a mature contract. This contract has been negotiated multiple times. The language is very stable. Some minor tweaks on salary, basically looking at where the negotiations and the contracts settled last year for the administrators as well as this year. We think we came out in a very good spot. Last year's settlements were over 2.5%. The few that were coming in this year ahead of us were looking about the same. We landed at a salary increase in each of 3 years. It's a 3-year agreement at 2.3% general wage increase, plus step movement for administrators, not at the max. Most of our administrators are already there. We also took a look at salaries across the board in our positions and basically realized that our assistant principal positions were a little bit low. We've recently lost 2 elementary assistant principals. So we looked at that, and those positions will be increased $750 in each of the years of the contract. That's 11 positions. On insurance, which is always a fun topic, the insurance premium cost sharing from the employees in the bargaining unit will go up by 1.5% each year. So when all is said and done, I think they end up at about 21%. We've also added vision care to put that in line with where the teachers union is. It's the same package of benefits. Very few language changes in the contract. Inclement weather, allowing the administrators to potentially work from home as opposed to having to come into the buildings. We amended some titles. The former title of the headmaster at the high school has been replaced with principal, and same for the house administrators. There was some language in there on a payroll lag that was accomplished in the last contract, so that language was taken out. And basically just cleaned up little odds and ends. And this document, by the way, the tentative agreement and other documents related to this will be posted on our website tomorrow, confidential until the Board of Education takes it up. The total increase in the cost of contract is 8.87%. That's over a 3-year period. I've done a couple of these. I think we landed in a good spot. We had, robust conversations with our administrators. We heard, their needs and their concerns. We know all of the extra work that they've done over the past 18 months, and it's been a lot. We recognize the work that they've done, and we appreciate that. And this is a reflection of the value of that we put on our administrators. And I know, Ms. Downey, if you had anything you wanted to add.
I think you two said it quite succinctly and well. I only had one question. If I guess, Sean, we got a draft of the contract this afternoon, and the salary schedule, or maybe Dr. Jones could answer it, whether the number, we don't, whether all the numbers in that salary schedule are accurate and double checked for the increases that were discussed.
Where was that on the red line document that you received today?
It's on the last page of the, at the very end, I'll tell you. It's Appendix A.
Okay.
That was
I
my
haven't
one,
s- I haven't
just
had
to dot the i's and cross the t's, kind of make sure they're accurate.
Okay, haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
If you could do that, we've got to get that over to if we vote on this tonight, that goes to the RTM tomorrow. So if you could just do that first thing in the morning, that would be great, because they will be taking this up in their committee meetings shortly. So we want to make sure we've got the right numbers there. All right, discussion on this? Oh, Ms. Stowe.
Just one quick question. I wanted to make sure I understood it. The salary increase is 2.3% each year. It's spread evenly.
Correct.
I love that. I like when there's consistency, because we've had contracts that are fluctuating. That's really helpful. And then lastly, a comment. I think it's fantastic that you guys did this and that you're able to settle on something without having outside help, without going to arbitration. So I think you guys should be commended for that. So thank you so much.
Just a fact, a piece of information for you: to arbitrate, the legal expenses alone are about $60,000. So that's just going into it. So just one reason why you don't want to do it. The other is you don't want acrimony with your employees. So trying to avoid that and find the right spot. All right. Any other discussion on this? All right, so the motion on the table is to accept to ratify the Greenwich Organization of School Administrators contract for the 2022 through 2025 years. Move forward to the RTM for approval. All those in favor? Mr. Chair, I called the question already, so you had your opportunity for discussion, but go ahead.
Point of order. I don't think I've ever voted on a contract in a public meeting where the information isn't public. Do we have a legal ruling from someone that says we can do this?
Yeah, the superintendent checked with Tom Mooney. This is exactly what we were told to do, as a matter of fact. So,
Tom Mooney instructed to do it this way.
Yes, because it's a confidential negotiation, it becomes public if the board in fact votes yes, because you could have challenges tonight where you could tell us or Joe to go back to the drawing board. So before it goes public, it's approved.
Okay, that's just I'm just worried because Christina, just referenced documents and numbers and appendices, and they're just not.
Well, we can make it subject to confirmation of those
I
numbers being
want to go
accurate.
ahead and approve it. It's never been done this way before, so this is totally new. I don't know who, our attorney is really the town attorney. It's not Tom. So Tom's the negotiator advisor. And, but for the purposes of this board.
I can tell you, Peter, from talking to the town attorney,
I was just wondering if we had an opinion from the town attorney.
The town attorney generally has told us to use Tom for our labor issues under state statute. That is what we've done, and we did go and confirm with Tom. So this was Tom's guidance. That's the way it's gone.
I'm going to assume it's legal. I just am uncomfortable, but okay, let's go ahead.
And it will be posted.
Well, just thanks for looking after it. I mean, it's better we talk about it than actually do it without understanding it. So thank you.
All right, so the motion on the table is to ratify this and send it forward to the RTM for approval. All those in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you to our administrators who gave up a good portion of their summer to spend with us, which I'm sure is a real thrill for them. All right, moving then to our last action item of the evening, the superintendent goals. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the superintendent goals for the 2021-2022 year as presented. Is there a second for that, Ms. Stowe? All right, discussion. Sorry, I just want to thank the superintendent for taking the feedback from the board and reworking these goals. Obviously, the first two are very important. I was glad to get that curriculum update tonight. Really good progress. Special education obviously is a hot topic. And then with goal 3, basically recognizing I know you've only listed 12 priorities. You probably have another 10 to 20 on another list that you didn't add in here. It's everything but the kitchen sink. So I appreciate the thought that's gone into this and all the things that you're moving forward. Discussion. All right, Ms. Kowalski.
So one of the things that I think is missing out of this is a goal related to just general academic achievement. I appreciate that there's a sub piece to goal 1, but that only deals with respect to the math component. And based upon the recent reports that have come out with regarding the SBAC materials testing and results, there's some real concern in a number of schools across the district as to the achievement of those students and how that's going to affect those schools, those particular students going forward. And this is one of the comments that I had made at the last meeting, is that there needed to be something here, a goal set for closing the achievement gap that we're seeing across the district. And I just, unfortunately, I just don't see that in here.
Okay, Ms. Downey.
Just asking you, Ms. Karen, in the district priorities section there, and this is whether you think it's sufficient, item number 5, which talks about closing the opportunity gaps as measured by Linkit. Just food for thought, if that
kind of satisfies what you were just raising.
Sorry, does that fall within the goal 3, which
Yeah,
says provide
yeah.
oversight to make sure that all departments are working in coordination with the success of district priorities?
Yeah, because then that's one of the, I'm just asking the question.
No, it doesn't, because I
Okay.
view goal number 3 as just a general job requirement, and I don't see how district priorities are provided within this piece of it. And I think, I also don't know what opportunity gaps are as measured by Linkit are. Those are defined terms that aren't in here, so I don't know what that is. So it just doesn't provide the clarity that I was looking for.
The points I was going to raise is, Tony, thank you for trying to work with us between a laundry list that's a work list versus priorities and goals. Numbers in the district priorities, it seemed to me that numbers 1 and 2 are already sort of covered in the 2 goals you have. So they're if we wind up going down a road, I mean, I don't think it makes a huge difference either way, but if we're revising these, you've already covered those. And district priorities, like, to me, like number 3, monitoring COVID for student attendance and individualized supports. That's just basic business. I'm not, so this is why I think it's dangerous what we got into district priorities versus a laundry list of, that's kind of keeping the doors open, which, I'm not sure it is a district priority because we want it to happen. But in terms of goals, it's not really a goal.
I might say that's why I put it in the priorities, but that was directly from one of the board members. And I thought, I'm doing it anyway. I don't mind putting it on here. So went back through all of my notes on, what the things that you thought should be reflected and tried to build them in. To be honest, I hope you saw from the curriculum team, my goal is to do everything that we need to get done in the district. And that's why from the day I was hired, looking at the strategic plan, I go back to 1920 when we had nothing on the web for parents. And by January of 20, we had K-5 drop-down menus. The team we have now has just taken that to a whole nother level. So, I hope you can see we're all very committed to, what's on here runs much deeper than I could put in any piece of paper or on something like this.
So just on that point, I applaud those efforts into getting that done, and that's clearly something that needed to be done, but those to me seem more like tasks of getting things done as opposed to a goal. So the task of we need to get more information onto the website so that parents can see it, that's a task, check the box, done, as opposed to a goal which says that we have an achievement gap problem in as particularly something along the lines that you defined in the math component, where you're going to hit certain target numbers. You're going to improve the ELA scores, by 4 points by the end of the year. That's a goal. And that's where I think we should have been. And if I wasn't clear in the last meeting, I apologize, but I think the goal should be, there's an achievement gap. It's well documented through the testing materials. It's what are we going to do? Not task oriented, check the box, but we're going to close that gap by 3%. That's the goal by the end of the year. I don't care how you get it done, but that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree to disagree just a little bit on the goals, because I think, we had some of these items that were in our strategic plan for 5 years. And we had goals and we had lots of numbers, but we didn't have a team that could actually accomplish some of this stuff that was in here. And I think that, we are really working towards making sure that we're meeting those standards. And I agree that you want to be focused on numbers, but I also believe children are much more than a number. And I can tell you right now in COVID, we have the math goal on here because that is a real focus for us right now. But, SEL and all those other components that we're dealing with coming out of the last year and a half are enormous. So from a school superintendent standpoint, I would never just bring you a bunch of numbers as my goal, because I think I would be really amiss if I did that. A lot of these things are culture and climate oriented, and that's what makes a great school system.
Mr. Chair.
I'll apologize in advance because I didn't participate in the last conversation. So if this is a repeat, my apologies in advance. I think we're mixing up goals And it's easy to do. Lots of organizations do this. I've managed tons of people. I always get this. I always hate goal setting because people get confused between their job description, the tasks they have to do every day, and what a goal is. And this won't be the first time this conversation's been had, and it's had millions of times, I'm sure, all the time. I understood the purpose of the goals was so that at the end of the year, the board could evaluate its one employee. Typically, you evaluate someone on whether or not they achieve the outcome that you're looking for. Of course, they have to do a ton of different things along the way. And I always thought in Greenwich, it was better that we had goals and did not mix that up with prescribing how it gets done. I've sat here with many, many boards, and superintendents are always saying, look, tell me what you want to get done. Don't tell me how to do it. How to do it is my job. And some people like to tell people what to do. I've always tried to respect, in this case, what's the goal? What's the outcome? Did we meet it or not? How it got done is why we hire a chief executive officer of a 1,500 person organization with 8,500 kids and a $250 million budget. I don't think the board should tell the superintendent necessarily how to do their job. What I'm concerned about in these goals is they don't look like goals to me. I would scrap the whole section that's the job description that's at the end. I'm sure, and then I'm listening to it, there was some reason it got added from the last conversation. That's Tony's job description. It's what you're supposed to do every day. That's not a goal. I just expect that to kind of happen. A goal to me would be something that is aligned to the objectives of the organization. And we have strategic goals. They're published. The board knows what they are. We have 5 academic goals. We have 5 student well-being goals. We have 3 stakeholder satisfaction goals. I'd love to see a short list of goals that addresses each of those so it's aligned to the board and what the board voted on it wants to get done. So as an example, in an academic area, Tony, I'm just making this up. I mean, you could argue it. Our goal is to get certain number of students, this is real students, to a particular level of educational achievement. I don't reduce kids to numbers, but I do want them to succeed. And we have a very clear way of measuring that. And we've had this year, for a lot of different reasons, we've had tremendous slippage. We're now at an academic level in SBAC that we were pre-2014. Okay. I'd love to see us focus on not getting ahead of that. I'd love to see us focus on recovering that for students. So I would think you would express a goal, or I'd love to see you express an academic goal that says, I'm going to recover X amount of lost learning. And as Barbara O'Neill, who served on this board with distinction for 8 years, used to say, it has to be a SMART goal. I forget what all the acronyms are, but it definitely has to be something clear and measurable. And we know you're going to get it done within a year. So I would love to see a clear academic goal. I'd also love to see a clear goal on something we're going to do that we can measure to improve student well-being. There's 5 goals there. I don't know the right ones, but ones where students feel reconnected to the school. That's a great goal. We have kids who were out, they were on remote. Connectedness is something we measure. We measure it using the Panorama survey as an example. We'll administer that next year. I'd love just to see kids more energized, traumatized, going back to school. I also agree with you on having a goal in special ed. I think that's super duper important. But implementing what our new administrator talked about, I view that as blocking and tackling. I'd rather see a goal like we will deliver 100% of our evaluations and PPTs on time, right? So all the activity kind of leads to an outcome that's parent-centric and that's student-centric. I agree with you 100%, Tony. There is so much that goes into getting that accomplished. The curriculum stuff tonight, that was terrific. I think that's going to ultimately result in parents and kids doing a better job with curriculum, and we'll be able to measure their increase in academic performance. I'll end it here. I'm really concerned. We lost a lot of ground because of COVID, whatever the reason was, in kids. We now have 500 extra kids in the district who are now below standard than before this whole thing started. We should zero in on that and help make that a goal. And then you should tell us, hey, here's what I need to get that accomplished. Or if you don't think you can recover all 500 to get us back where we were before all this started, pick a number, 250. I don't know. I'd love to see some goals that are parent and kid centric. They're measurable. They're aligned to the strategic goals of the board. And all this other stuff you're doing, it's great. And keep doing it. But those are activities for the staff to do, being the professionals that they are. I don't think they're goals for between the board and the superintendent. So anyway, I'm sorry I missed the last conversation. I probably would have given that feedback back then anyway, but here we are.
Ms. Hirsch.
I appreciate that you took all of our feedback and suggestions and thoughts as to what we felt was important and tried to add it into the document that we're looking at this evening. We certainly don't want to overload you with things that you don't necessarily feel are attainable or what have you this year. But I know I'd sent back a suggestion as to how to sort of reorganize it so it was tied into our strategic plan, and maybe that's something we could look at. But when we're talking about the achievement gap and trying to close that, I certainly don't think we can make a huge forward movement in a year that we've already had a setback, and not just here, this is nationally. But it is certainly a goal that we should focus on. And this leads me to ask a quick question because we haven't had this discussion in a while. We used to have something here called SIP goals, student improvement plans at each school, and they were tied to math and language, ELA. And we used to see those as a board, midway in the fall. They were, 3-year goals, and we would get updates on that. We haven't had that in quite some time. Are we still focused on SIP goals? Because that's certainly something we could bring back to look at our math achievement and ELA.
We do still have our goals, and I think you said there's one. Is that what you said? Let me just say, we're very, very focused in general, but I think instead of a big swath of a group, we really are trying to drill down to individual students. And I will say, from coming out of COVID, when we saw our SBAC, I actually think they're pretty good. We have pockets where absolutely we had some kids that were really challenged for a number of reasons, which, I'm sure most of you recognize. Children had families where they lost their jobs or they stopped coming to school. Yes, we absolutely have some challenges, and we're addressing as much of that as we can, also through ARP, through additional interventionists, all the things that we're doing to be able to make those gains that we need to. But overall, when you think about early literacy, for instance, and, we lost, 7 percentage points or 6 percentage points when a teacher couldn't even bring children around the table to do, small group lessons. They were teaching more like 1980 than 2021. So we're actually very pleased. I think when the board sees it, yes, we have pockets, we have a lot of work to do. But overall, as a system, we saw some good results for our children in comparison, especially to what happened around the country.
Well, so that's why I was saying it may be something that we look at our goals as to bring back the discussion on SIP. Again, there's countless studies talking about how easy it is to lose learning and how much longer it takes for them to regain lost learning and then have forward movement. So I don't want to put something forward that's not achievable within a year, whether we put a 3-year lengthy goal to get back to where we were and then move forward is one thing. And that's not for me to decide. That's for you and our educators to see what they think is achievable.
So just for clarification, our SIP goals for the individual buildings are just for 1 year. So they do their goals for 1 year. For this year, they will have they have to have at least one academic goal, but most of our building administrators put down 2 or 3, an SEL goal. And I'd like to change the SEL to social emotional growth rather than social emotional learning, because social emotional learning is really an outcome of making sure that we are supporting students in their social emotional growth. And then, of course, we have the parent engagement goal for the SIP plans. They have been given to the template has been given to the building administrators, and they are in the process of looking at all of their data with their teams, their school teams, and they should be ready soon. So we can have, I'll have Mr. D'Amico and I will put them together and we'll be able to get that to you at some point this fall.
Yeah, that would be great. I was gonna say, having been on the SIP committee for many, many years, I'm very familiar, but you're bringing forward stuff on SIP plans that I've not seen before. So I think that would be helpful to.
Okay, can we try to bring the conversation back to the goals that are actually on the table? Actually, Dr. Francis first.
So I'm a little bit torn because on the one hand, I feel like I totally understand the concept of we should have SMART goals. They should be sort of broader and bigger picture. On the other hand, I feel like I'm going to start sounding a little bit like you, but over the years, we keep doing that and we keep doing them and we keep changing them. And then we never get there. And then we never really deal with the fact that we're never getting there. And I sort of feel like, and I sort of feel,
Stay focused on this.
right. Well, no, but my issue is that in some ways, I guess fundamentally, I was sort of prepared to come here and vote for kind of anything because I feel like my job, which I think I did a really good one, was with the rest of my board members, was to hire you. And I have a lot of faith in what you're doing. And I kind of feel like this piece of paper is not really going to make that much of a difference. And it's a little discouraging, I think, maybe to say that. But ultimately, I kind of think that's the case. And I'm just not sure how much energy to put into creating things that never seem to go anywhere. So it's a little bit defeatist, but I think that's kind of where I am.
So I will just add in, I think this is a problem of our own making. You presented goals, they were reasonable goals, and then we basically gave you a long laundry list of stuff. And you've tried to encapsulate that in the document. At the end of the day, you know, there is a big difference between your goals, the organization's goals, a strategic plan, right? And in the day-to-day business of running the district, which you do quite well. I think you know what the big rocks are. I'm not gonna try to parse every word of this and beat you over the head with it. I think that that's not a good use of anybody's time. I think these are the things that are going to take up the majority of your time this year. I think we need to recognize that, and I think we just need to move on and let you get back to your work. But other discussion, Ms. Stowe.
Just real fast, I think Gaetan said it perfectly, and I was proud to be on the board with Gaetan when we hired you. We hired the right CEO. What we saw tonight was that you've surrounded yourself with the right team and you're getting stuff done. And you're right, I could sit here and micromanage, and I know we threw a lot at you. I like that you added Western, for example. That's not something we had in there, and you pointed out that that was something that shouldn't be forgotten. So I'd say let's vote on this and let's let you get to work.
Mr. Kelly calling the question. All right, Mr. Chair, and then we're gonna stop.
Guys, I'm trying my damnedest to get us to an 8-0 here. And I think it's important that the superintendent has that. We can keep doing what we're doing. By the way, for some of us, this is the next set of people. This is what they're going to be evaluating the superintendent on come September. So to dismiss it as I'm with you 100%, you know, Dr. Francis, stuff that gets written down that doesn't get done and what have you. That's why you spend time on this. This is the one time the board interfaces to the superintendent and makes clear what the agreed expectations are. I mean, I would just, you need a goal document. You need a goal document that's short, precise, clear, not 20 goals, not 500 tasks. And, I'd love to vote for something, but, I'd actually, I'm glad to make a motion to do one more turn of the crank. I don't know what happened at the last meeting, so I missed that beat where somebody created some confusion to the superintendent. And I don't take anything away from the superintendent. This is the board. If the board doesn't provide clear direction, it's not on the superintendent. This is the board goals in interaction, to the superintendent as manager to employee. And if we're not providing clear direction, I mean, I'd love to vote for it. I'm not voting for this. So if somebody wants to work it a little bit, I'd love to get behind it. I'd love to get behind something. This ain't it for me.
I'm calling the question. This was our second read of this document. And, quite honestly, we said at the end of the last meeting that if people had additional feedback, they should have shared it. At this point, we're calling the question. So the motion on the table is to approve the superintendent goals for the 2021-2022 school year. All those in favor? All those opposed? Passes 6-2. Thank you very much. Before I take the motion to adjourn from you, Mr. Kelly, I just want to thank our continuing education program for their written report, as well as the Greenwich Alliance for Education. Both are doing great work. If you haven't looked at the continuing education program guide at some point, you should. I actually took a class, guitar class. That was kind of fun. We have a lot of ESL programming in there, and that's why we have that program. It's a mandated program, but it does a great job. And the Alliance has been a great partner to the Greenwich Public Schools. So Superintendent, if you wouldn't mind thanking all of the staff that was involved and also the Alliance, that would be wonderful. With that, Mr. Kelly, did you have a motion you wanted to make?
Well, before I make the motion, I would like to wish my wife a happy 32nd anniversary. So I've got, of course, and me, and one more hour to celebrate. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
All right, and I'm going to second that motion. All those in favor of adjourning? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Just how you wanted to spend your anniversary, Joe.